Chapter 255. Moon Rebirth. Surpassing the body, Guang Pu extinguished all these wild thoughts of biting off more than he could chew. Then, he focused his attention on the 1296 materials that were thrown from different positions on the moon. Before she had gathered the materials, she had already thought through the refinement method of the tribulation-transcending magic tool in detail. Now that she had gone over her thoughts again, the cluster of silver osmanthus above her head turned slightly and instantly released countless mysterious auras. These mysterious auras rippled in all directions, causing the nearly endless chaotic energy inside the three-dimensional talisman at the center of the moon to shake violently. Along with the violent vibrations, countless energy threads condensed in the chaotic energy. These energy threads were like ropes that were woven together. In the end, like a string of beads, they strung together the 1296 materials that were floating in front of her. Then, a silver flame suddenly appeared out of thin air, ignited from the center of the silver osmanthus, and directly shot out of the silver osmanthus. After the silver flame shot out, it did not stop at all. Through some incredible connection, it crossed the void, twisted time and space, and connected to the threads that had strung together the 1296 materials. Then, along the threads, it completely wrapped around all of the 1296 materials. These 1296 materials were special existences that had been produced by the moon after it had absorbed all kinds of star essence and impurities, and then compressed by different pressures. Although these existences were strange in nature, because they were similar in nature, they had the same characteristic. That was, these materials were extremely valuable N-type, refining materials. Moreover, the magic tool that was refined with them definitely had an indescribable affinity with the lunar essence. The silver flame that had been produced from the center of the silver osmanthus was an extremely mysterious refining fire. It corresponded to the true fire of the sun, but it was easier to control. From its name, it could be seen that although this fire was very different from the Tao fire that had been emitted from Luo Fan's Tao fruit, its function was the same. At least, it had endless benefits for refining magic tools. If it was used to refine materials, it could increase the grade of the magic tool being refined. Although the degree of improvement was not the same, this was clearly for sure. The Tao fire was born from a Tao fruit, but this item was born from the silver osmanthus. The two were produced from different sources, and there was a huge difference in realm. How could the effect be exactly the same? As the refining fire burned, the 1296 materials began to emit wisps of various colored smoke. At the same time, the materials also began to melt rapidly. This process was clearly the refining fire quenching the materials, and it was constantly removing the impurities contained in the materials. The smoke that was emitting various colored light. This burning process lasted for a full 3 days and 3 nights before it stopped. After 3 days and 3 nights, the 1296 materials had shrunk by more than 1,000 times. When these materials had first appeared, their combined sizes were probably as large as a sphere with a diameter. But after 3 days and 3 nights, the total volume of these materials had already been reduced to less than 100 feet in diameter. The change was so great that it was quite shocking. At this time, these materials had completely melted into liquid. Under the mysterious string, each drop of liquid looked like a necklace that was emitting various colored light pearls. Under the reflection of the surrounding gray chaotic vital energy, it was as beautiful and enchanting as a luminous pearl in the darkness. As Guang Pu looked at these materials, countless words and complicated patterns flowed through her eyes. Those were the spells and magical powers that she had previously thought about in the refining process. As these words and patterns flowed through her mind, Guang Pu's mind gained a more intuitive understanding of the magic tool's structure. She raised her hand and pointed at the cluster of silver osmanthus flowers that was 10 feet in circumference, which was outlined by countless tiny lines. The cluster of silver osmanthus flowers suddenly emitted a silver light. This light was misty and mysterious, as if it was a domain, and it instantly enveloped an area of 1,000 feet. Within this domain, Guangpu felt that she could have absolute control over any trace of energy, and even the laws of space and time. As this feeling appeared, all kinds of thoughts in Guangpu's mind seemed to be directly reflected in the 1,296 materials. Strands of mysterious threads directly appeared in the void. These threads were not formed by energy, but were very mysterious, as if they were the condensation of space and time. As soon as they appeared, they attached themselves to the over 1,000 materials as if they had taken root. As these threads attached themselves to the materials, they began to circulate rapidly, constantly flickering in the void. This situation seemed to be that the necklace in the void was suddenly changing rapidly, its color, its light, and its power were circulating rapidly. During this process, the 1,296 types of materials were constantly gathering at the center in some mysterious and inconceivable way. This process continued at an extremely fast speed, and in almost a 10,000th of an instant, it had already changed from a radius of 100 feet to the size of a head. In the blink of an eye, the liquid necklace formed from the 1,296 materials in front of Guangpu had turned into a liquid sphere that was the size of a head. Within the sphere, the 1,296 types of crystal clear, extremely pure, and resplendent liquid interweaved together, constantly circulating in some mysterious and incredible way, intertwining with each other. Furthermore, it was constantly moving in a mysterious and unimaginable trajectory, gradually converging into a ball. As Guangpu looked at this scene, the countless words and patterns in her eyes changed even faster. Fuse! Suddenly, she shouted softly. As she cried out, countless mysterious auras rapidly gathered towards her from all directions, and in the blink of an eye, they entered the mysterious liquid in front of her. The incredibly profound silver osmanthus above her head flashed rapidly in that instant, and countless strange ripples were emitted from it. As these changes occurred, the liquid sphere in front of her rapidly changed, and all sorts of light quickly fused together. Gradually, the light emitted by the entire sphere became pure and condensed, as if it was an extremely simple light that only contained a single substance. However, it also seemed to be extremely complicated, as if it was formed from an endless amount of light interweaving together to form a mysterious light. After the mysterious light appeared, the liquid sphere was further compressed. Soon, it was compressed into the size of a water droplet, seeming to contain everything, yet also seeming to be extremely simple and pure. Light flashed repeatedly in Guangpu's eyes. Then, she quickly waved her hands. As she waved her hands, the cluster of silver osmanthus flowers 3 feet above her head rotated faster and faster, and the frequency became very mysterious. Countless three-dimensional talismans appeared in the air. These three-dimensional talismans were extremely profound, and all of them could be found in the cluster of osmanthus, but not a single one could truly be found in the cluster of silver osmanthus. After these three-dimensional talismans appeared, they were inserted into the water droplet one by one, transforming into an extremely wonderful and incredible existence, and completely fusing with the water droplet. And with each three-dimensional talisman that entered, the water droplet would undergo an indescribable change, as if its appearance was slightly changed. There were 1,296,000 of these three-dimensional talismans. After all of the three-dimensional talismans were formed and inserted into the water droplet, the small water droplet gradually changed shape as these talismans entered, and in the blink of an eye, it had already turned into a small sphere. If Luo Fan were here, he would find that the shape of this sphere was very familiar. That was a moon that had shrunk to a size of tens of millions of times. However, compared to the real moon, this sphere had fewer changes, and it appeared to be more regular. But it looked even more profound, as if it contained principles that the real moon did not, and it seemed to completely reveal the mysteries of the real moon that had been concealed by time and space. After the appearance of this moon, the solemn expression on Guang Pu's face became even more pronounced. She opened her mouth, and a large mouthful of blood essence was spat out, instantly colliding with this small, shrunken moon. Screech! This sound seemed to shake the entire universe, even causing time and space to collapse slightly, and there was an incredible extreme distortion. After that, the small moon stretched and shrank, as if it was breathing, and also like a heartbeat. It was as if she suddenly had an additional body, and suddenly had a completely different angle to observe the world, and a feeling of all things in the universe surged into Guang Pu's heart. This small moon in front of her seemed to have become one with her. And with the help of this small moon, she discovered that her connection with the entire big moon was many times closer. If it was said that after the silver osmanthus was formed, it was said that the two of them had become one, then at this moment, she felt that this moon was even more like her own body than her own body, and her control over this moon was also more flexible than her own body. With a slight thought, she raised her hand, and a bit of power, which had already transformed more than half into magic power, rushed out of her hand. In an instant it crossed the void and rushed into this small moon. A soft sound rang out, and the void trembled, and the vital energy vibrated. Chapter 256. Chapter 256. Death. Silver Moonchild, Shiha. Then, the moon with a diameter of 1,000 feet suddenly rushed up and instantly came to the top of her head. With a turn, it was like a shadow, and in the blink of an eye, it had completely wrapped around the cluster of silver osmanthus that was 3 feet above her head. After wrapping the silver osmanthus, there seemed to be a very strange layer of cloud and mist in the middle of the moon, rolling in a very strange way, showing some kind of indescribable and incredible mystery. At this moment, Guang Pu only felt that her silver osmanthus and the magic tool that had just been refined had fused into one. The feeling of the entire moon turning into her body, the strange feeling of completely controlling the entire moon, had completely fused into one. Then, there was an indescribable, mysterious, and indescribable change. A strange vitality suddenly emitted from the moon that was 1,000 feet in size above her head. Under this vitality, there was a strange slight tremor coming from the silver osmanthus. This tremor was very strange, very subtle, and also very mysterious. It was like a natural tremor of the great Tao of heaven and earth at the moment before the birth of a life, coming from the silver osmanthus in the center of the moon. This tremor lasted for a full 2 hours before it finally stopped. During this process, the silver osmanthus in the center of the moon also rolled for a full hour without stopping for a moment. Just after this tremor stopped, a rather strange spiritual consciousness suddenly emerged from the combination, from the silver osmanthus, from an inexplicable place. With the birth of this spiritual consciousness, the moon and the silver osmanthus seemed to have undergone an extremely subtle but profound change. Who am I? Such a question suddenly came from the spiritual consciousness that was born out of thin air and entered Guang Pu's mind. Guang Pu's heart trembled slightly, her face showing an inexplicable horror and incomparable joy. Although she had never seen this thing, she had heard her senior brother, who was also her husband Luo Fu, talk about it. With the help of Luo Fu's description and the various characteristics of this soul sense, Guang Pu was finally convinced that this soul sense was the thing that Luo Fu had mentioned. It was an extremely mysterious spiritual sense that possessed emotions, wisdom, thoughts, and feelings, but it had no sense of self, commonly known as treasure spirits. After the small moon fused with the silver osmanthus, a treasure spirit was born. This proved that the magic treasure she refined had become a magic treasure after fusing with the silver osmanthus. He had skipped the process that would normally require an endless amount of time or the smelting of all sorts of mysterious and profound objects. The reason why the artifact spirit asked such a question was because Guang Pu never expected that the artifact would have such a change after combining with the silver kasha. She didn't even name the artifact. All sorts of thoughts flashed through Guang Pu's mind, and she suddenly understood everything. However, at this moment it was not the time to think about the mysteries within. Her mind moved slightly, and two words emerged from the depths of her mind: Shiha. As soon as these two words appeared, Guang Pu instantly decided on the name of the magic treasure. She said, "You are Shiha. You are the treasure spirit of my magic treasure, the silver moon. You will control the silver moon on my behalf and resist the tribulations." Shiha. Shiha. So I should be the silver moon child, Shiha. I see. In that case, Shiha greets you, Master. I will destroy all external demons and tribulations for Master. The voice repeated softly. The voice sounded very confused at first, but later on, it seemed to have found its backbone and its goal. It even seemed to be a little excited. As it spoke, the silver moon that was spinning above Guang Pu's head suddenly shook and emitted a silver light. This silver light was shining brightly and looked extremely pure. It seemed to contain endless light and shadow, but it also seemed like there was a void inside it, a void where nothing existed. Guang Pu's mind followed the light in front of her closely. She carefully sensed all the subtle changes that were happening inside the light. At this moment, she suddenly felt countless information flowing through her mind. A kind of Tao technique that was different from the great Tao that she had comprehended appeared in it. In an instant, she seemed to understand how to create living beings, how to form a body of energy in the void, and how to create a body from the void that was stronger than her own. Just as she had this kind of enlightenment, the light continued to condense in front of her, and finally formed a physical body. Her physical form was that of a very cute little girl of 4 or 5 years old. Her skin was almost transparent, and her makeup was like jade. The little girl looked young, but her eyes were drifting, as if she had seen the unfathomable great Tao in the dark. She could see the endless truths of heaven and earth flashing before her eyes at all times. This gave her a special charm. She did not seem like a little girl. Instead, she seemed like an old woman who had gone through countless years of cultivation and returned to her youth, becoming a great Tao seeker. Looking at this gaze, Guang Pu suddenly had a very strange feeling in her heart. Everything about her had no secrets in this little girl's eyes. All of her abilities and Tao techniques were profound and unfathomable in her eyes. With this strange feeling, she carefully sensed and savored it in her heart. In the blink of an eye, Guang Pu understood what was going on. After understanding, she could not help but be overjoyed. She felt that her future was extremely bright. The appearance of this feeling clearly meant that the little girl's cultivation was at least a level higher than her own. Moreover, the little girl before her was the treasure spirit of her silver moon magic treasure. She was completely under her absolute control. Her first goal was to protect her and help her overcome the heavenly tribulation. In this way, it was equivalent to having an existence on the same level as her master protecting her at all times. It was as if he could resist all kinds of tribulations for her at all times. How could Guang Pu, who already knew how powerful her master was, not be happy? There's actually such a change. It looks like it won't be a problem for me to overcome the 8th and 9th heavenly tribulations in the future. Guang Pu instantly understood. The treasure spirit of a magic treasure was innately an indescribable existence. If it was distinguished by the cultivation realm of a cultivator, then it was at least equivalent to a cultivator who had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit. Although there were countless restrictions, and its power was only concentrated in a certain aspect, it was far from being comparable to a cultivator who had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit. However, the cultivation realm, strength, and cultivation of a cultivator who had attained the earthly immortal Tao fruit were not exaggerated at all. Compared to the treasure spirit of this magic treasure, the heavenly tribulation caused by a cultivator seeking the earthly immortal Tao fruit was still within its limits, no matter how strong it was. It could be said that with Shiha's protection, Even if Guang Pu were to undergo all 9 heavenly tribulations together, it would still be difficult for her to break through Shiha's defense and hurt her. Moreover, it was only the 8th and 9th heavenly tribulations combined. With this absolute understanding, Guang Pu felt the uneasy feeling that had been weighing down on her heart when Luo Fan shifted his gaze. The feeling of insecurity instantly disappeared, and was replaced by a feeling that everything was under control. As this feeling of having everything under control emerged, a strange mysterious light emanated from her body. The mysterious light floated in the air, making her look like a fairy who had descended from the 9th heaven. "I'll leave it to you in the future." Guang Pu smiled and bowed to Shiha. "Shiha understands." The little girl bowed, and with a turn of her body, she transformed into a ray of mysterious silver light and rushed into the silver moon above her head. As she rushed in, the silver moon suddenly rotated rapidly, and at the same time it gradually shrank. Not long after, it had shrunk into a small, fist-sized silver moon. It sank and rushed into Guang Pu's sea of consciousness through the mud ball between her brows. It appeared next to the towering tree and began to slowly revolve around it. After the ray of mysterious silver light rushed in, a small human figure appeared on the cluster of silver osmanthus in the center of the silver moon. The human figure floated in the air, blurry and dreamlike. Under the illumination of the surrounding silver osmanthus, it looked like a god in a pearl. As the silver moon entered her body, an extremely clear feeling appeared in Guang Pu's heart. The energy that was transforming in her body instantly sped up by hundreds of times. Countless strange energies continued to gather and fuse into the energy in her body. Then, it was changed and transformed by some unfathomable mystery. Finally, it fused into the three-dimensional talisman prototype that was trying to take shape, increasing the completeness of the three-dimensional talisman prototype a little bit. With this change, Guang Pu suddenly had an inexplicable understanding. In 3 years, it would be the time when the 8th and 9th heavens tribulations would come together. After this period of understanding, her eyes could not help but flash with anticipation. However, this light was soon drowned in the endless light of thinking and understanding, and it was difficult to find. At this moment, Luo Fan, who was flying in the air, suddenly stopped. He looked up, and his heart was filled with surprise. He can actually refine a magic weapon without attaining the fruit of Tao. I thought that Hong Jun would be the most successful person in my sect. It seems that I have to change my view a little now. Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. As the golden light and silver light flashed in his eyes, he had seen through the thick layers of wind, thunder, and fire, and the almost endless starry sky. He saw the state of Guang Pu at this time. Even if she refined a magic weapon beyond Luo Fan's expectation, the gap between Guang Pu and Luo Fan was still so big that it was almost unimaginable. Even if she wanted to defend against Luo Fan's sight, she could not to mention that she could not perceive Luo Fan's sight at all. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan had seen through all the appearances. He saw the silver moon that was revolving around the divine soul in Guang Pu's sea of consciousness. Chapter 257. Hongjuan's strange idea and the opportunity for a breakthrough. At this moment, Luo Fan was 30 billion miles away from Buzhou Mountain. During the few days when Guang Pu was refining the magic treasure, he turned into a rainbow and flew towards where Hongjun was at a speed that wasn't very fast but didn't stop. And it was for Hongjun. Previously, when he was calculating the general trend of the world, he felt that Hongjun was in a very special process. His cultivation realm had increased to the limit of the individual immortal realm of the earthly immortal realm. Moreover, because he had come up with a strange method to refine the pagoda-shaped magic treasure, it caused his mind to be constantly tempered. When Luo Fan calculated, he had already found a faintly discernible opportunity to break through. However, this opportunity for a breakthrough was also quite dangerous. If Hongjun was not careful, What awaited him would be death, and all his cultivation would be for naught. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan began to turn into a dark green streak of light and shot towards Hong Jun in the distance. Hong Jun was tens of billions of miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Even if it was Luo Fan, if he didn't use the Wuji Palace to increase his flying speed, it would take him a few days to fly over such a distance. Therefore, when Guang Pu was refining that strange magic treasure, Luo Fan was still more than 30 billion miles away from Buzhou Mountain. He raised his eyes and looked through the endless distance. He crossed layers of obstacles and carefully observed the effect of the divine wood osmanthus flower method in the process of the magic treasure forming. In the end, he was disappointed to find that this matter could not be repeated. Only Guang Pu could use it, and even Guang Pu could only use it this time. The others couldn't use this method to do the same thing next time. Understanding this, Luo Fan could only sigh helplessly. There should be no more suspense in the heavenly tribulation 3 years later. It seems that if Fu doesn't work hard, he will never be able to catch up to his wife. Luo Fan thought to himself and retracted his gaze. His figure shook slightly, and he once again turned into a dark green rainbow that flew away into the distance. However, it left behind an afterimage that was over 10,000 feet long in midair. It was as if it had torn through the void and disappeared without a trace in a flash. Hong Jun was still more than 30 billion miles away from where he was at the moment. He had run a lot further away from the place that Luo Fan had deduced last time. Another few days passed. Finally, Luo Fan came to a place about 60 billion miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Although the primordial world was huge, it could no longer be said to be the extreme of the northwest. Although it was still the northwestern border of the untainted land, in a sense, it could be considered to be deep into the untainted land. Luo Fan raised his head and looked up after Ning Ning's figure appeared. In a flash of golden and silver light in his eyes, he had already seen through the thick astral wind, thunder and fire layer. He saw the tower-shaped magic weapon suspended in the 9th layer. At that moment, the mysterious tower-shaped magic treasure hovered silently in the air. It did not release any power, nor did it shine with any mysterious light. It was as if it was just a tower sculpture carved from ordinary stones. Although the image was simple and mysterious, it was difficult to attract the attention of cultivators. Within 1,000,000 miles around this tower-shaped magic weapon, there was no existence of any astral wind, thunder and fire at all. There was even no astral wind, thunder and fire left here. At this moment, there was a rare astral wind, thunder and fire vacuum, which seemed to be similar to the void below the astral wind, thunder and fire layer. The light in Luo Fan's eyes intensified slightly. In the blink of an eye, he had already seen through the barrier of this magic weapon and the scene inside it. Inside the magic weapon was a boundless spirit space. It was filled with all kinds of primordial qi, spirit qi, astral qi, and evil qi. It was like the chaotic scene before the creation of the world. Amidst this chaotic energy, hundreds of billions of specks of light were like countless stars decorating this boundless world. They were the astral wind, thunder and fire lifeforms that had been lured in by Hongjuan's sermon. Of course, at this moment, these astral wind, thunder and fire lifeforms were already very different from those in the outside world. They were almost different in nature. Mysterious and unpredictable light emitted from these hundreds of billions of astral wind, thunder and fire lifeforms. They collided, intertwined, and merged with each other. A soaring serpent of unfathomable length and unfathomable size was outside the hundreds of billions of specks of light. It was like the legendary world serpent. Its head and tail were intertwined as it continuously and slowly rotated in a mysterious circle. And in the depths of the infinite void, a figure that seemed to suppress the past, present, and future sat cross-legged. His entire body was emitting a myriad of tiny lights, faintly enveloping the entire spirit space. Every inch of this spirit space was filled with these tiny lights. This person was Hong Jun. This spirit space was the cave abode that Hong Jun had opened up. At this moment, Hong Jun no longer spoke. He only sat cross-legged with his eyes closed in the depths of the spirit space. He used the hundreds of millions of scattered light dots that his body emitted to communicate with the entire spirit space and the hundreds of billions of astral wind, thunder and fire lifeforms in the spirit space to communicate with each other. A very strange and inexplicable change was interacting with the spirit space and Hong Jun. He had been in such a situation for a full 36 years. At this moment, this change process was about to end, and the result was about to come out. At this moment, Luo Fan took a step forward and used the so close, yet worlds apart method. In the blink of an eye, he had crossed nearly 10,000 miles and came to 30 feet in front of the tower-shaped magic weapon. When he came here, he suddenly felt a faint warning aura shrouding him. This aura was becoming more and more obvious and stronger. It seemed that as long as he continued to stay here, an unimaginable attack would be waiting for him. He sensed carefully. Luo Fan knew that this aura was the defensive aura that the tower-shaped magic weapon emitted automatically. It would automatically change because of the approaching aura. It was because of the existence of this aura that there was no astral wind, thunder and fire lifeforms within millions of miles of the tower-shaped magic weapon. So that's how it is, no wonder. Luo Fan faintly smiled. With a single thought, his body suddenly lost all sense of existence. Not only did he not release any aura, but he was also faintly emitting some kind of distorted thought. Even if someone saw him with their own eyes, they would unconsciously ignore him. With this change, the warning aura that covered millions of miles around him became calm and stable again. He had used various means to completely hide all his aura, so that the magic weapon could not react on its own. Seeing that the magic weapon had finally returned to normal, Luo Fan raised his hand and summoned a white magic cloud the size of an acre. He sat cross-legged on the magic cloud and slowly closed his eyes. As he closed his eyes, a tower-shaped magic weapon appeared in his mind. This magic weapon was constantly changing, constantly stripping off the surface, stripping off all kinds of materials, and gradually penetrating into the various energy compositions of the tower-shaped magic weapon. All kinds of talismans were flowing. With this movement, he gradually grasped the essence of Hong Jun's state at this moment. It really is a fantastic idea. After grasping the state of Hong Jun at this time, Luo Fan could not help but secretly praise. It turned out that at this moment, Hong Jun was actually using his own cultivation to merge the treasure spirit of this magic weapon with the flying serpent that he cultivated from the true martial essence transforming technique. This pagoda-shaped magic treasure was forged by Hong Jun himself. And because his own cultivation level was just at the beginning of the earthly immortal realm, not only was his cultivation level insufficient, but the earthly immortal realm that he had achieved was also much weaker than the one that Luo Fan had achieved. Therefore, although the magic weapon that he refined was barely at the level of a magic weapon, its treasure spirit had never been complete. It only had a spiritual consciousness that was not even comparable to that of a normal baby, and it could not provide much help to him. If he wanted to wait for it to grow, he would need at least a few yuanweis of sacrificial refinement, or a large amount of treasures of heaven and earth would be used to enhance it. Today, although Hong Jun did not have the power that Luo Fan had, he could not understand the existence of the primordial calamity that was going to happen 30,000 years later. But after all, he was the legendary Tao ancestor. He had great talent, but he also felt that he did not have much time left. He needed to improve his cultivation level as soon as possible. Therefore, in the process of preaching and luring the billions of living beings, he constantly thought about how to change this situation, how to let the power of this magic weapon truly be unleashed, and how to let the treasure spirit of this magic weapon grow quickly. Finally, 36 years ago, he thought of a method that Luo Fan had never taught him. The soaring serpent that he had refined from his own martial arts had fused with the vague, indistinct treasure spirit of the magical treasure. Or in other words, let the flying serpent devour the treasure spirit and replace it. If that was the case, the flying serpent would become the treasure spirit of the magic weapon. It would have a spiritual consciousness that contained infinite fighting instincts. Not only would it have the unique power of this magic weapon, it would also have the powerful combat power of the true martial spiritual transformation technique. It could even allow him to understand the earthly immortal fruit of Wei during this process. Finally, he could break through the immortal realm and become a perfected immortal. Unfortunately, there is no such thing as reaping without sowing. The treasure spirit of this magic weapon existed. Although its spiritual consciousness was only equivalent to that of a baby, its survival instincts were not to be underestimated. To devour it, the resistance of the treasure spirit would not be weak. At this moment, Hongjuan's consciousness was fighting against the treasure spirit of this magic weapon, against the entire magic weapon itself. If the flying serpent devoured the treasure spirit, he would be able to understand countless mysteries in the process and use them to achieve breakthroughs. Chapter 258. The Sea of Consciousness. In Hongjun's Sea of Consciousness, the treasure spirit of the tower-shaped magic treasure had turned into an illusory figure. It had no fixed shape, but it was tens of thousands of feet tall like a giant jelly. Hongjun's godly soul had changed a little after all these years of cultivation. It was a sturdy, towering humanoid figure that exuded an unyielding and world-splitting aura. At this moment it was slightly more substantial, and it felt more real than before. In addition to his godly soul and the jelly-like magic treasure spirit, there was another existence in this vast sea of consciousness. The soaring serpent that was condensed by the true martial spirit transforming skill was like a shadow, like a real entity, like it didn't exist. It was not a real entity, but it was formed by the simple instinctive spiritual consciousness of the soaring serpent in the spirit space outside. At this time, the soaring serpent, under the control of the tall humanoid shadow, was constantly swimming in the sea of consciousness. It kept circling and releasing all kinds of mysterious attacks, trying to smash the giant jelly and devour it. Although the jelly-like treasure spirit looked very unreliable, it was very powerful. Its body was extremely flexible, and its speed was incomparably fast. In the process of the soaring serpent's attack, it also released all kinds of strange and powerful attacks that collided with the soaring serpent's attack, creating an incomparably huge impact. According to the current situation of the battle, the soaring serpent's attack was even more mysterious, and it had already gained the upper hand. And the jelly was obviously at a disadvantage. At this time, in addition to all kinds of magical powers and magic arts from Luofan, there were also all kinds of magical powers that he had comprehended after attaining the earthly immortal's Tao fruit. The true martial spirit transforming skill had been deduced to the limit by him during this process. Hongjun had used his own methods to analyze, distinguish, and change the various martial arts mysteries and the truths of heaven and earth contained in this wonderful technique created by Luofan. In the end, he had completely integrated them into his own body, almost turning them into instincts and manifesting them on the soaring serpent. It was the simple instincts of the soaring serpent that had become more complete, more tenacious, and more condensed. At this moment, under Hongjun's control, the long soaring serpent was like his own body. It shuttled up and down in the sea of consciousness, swaying left and right, twisting back and forth, crazily heading towards the jelly circle formed by the treasure spirit. This soaring serpent had a dragon's head and a snake's body. It was a strange creature shrouded in strange clouds and mist. It had no claws. However, it would be a mistake to think that its attacks were monotonous, that its attacks were easy to dodge and see through just because it didn't have claws. At this moment, the battle that was happening in Hongjun's mind vividly displayed the fighting style of this clawless and legless creature. It had reached a peak realm and was close to the limit. The boundlessly profound trajectories revealed countless grand Tao truths that were sufficient to allow a martial artist to comprehend the grand Tao of martial techniques and shatter space. The energy impact that was sufficient to shatter space, and the attacks that were thousands of times more profound than an ordinary martial artist's attack. All of them were evolving boundless grand Tao truth. An encirclement composed of all kinds of energies, information, and trajectories gradually enveloped the jelly transformed from the treasure spirit. Although the jelly was emitting beams of light, borrowing the innate and acquired divine abilities of the billions of astral wind, thunder, fire, and other living beings in the magic treasure to unleash an incomparably powerful force, the momentum it produced was earth-shattering. However, even so, it couldn't block the soaring serpent's attack. The activity space of the entire jelly formed by the treasure spirit became smaller and smaller. By the time Luo Fan arrived at the magic treasure's main body, the activity space of the treasure spirit had already been reduced to less than a square kilometer. This bit of space was already extremely large for other things, but for the treasure spirit of the magic treasure, it couldn't even completely contain its own body. It could be said that this had already compressed the activity space to the limit. If this continued, the treasure spirit would lose all ability to resist and would eventually become a sacrificial lamb, unable to make a comeback. At this moment, success seemed to be right in front of him, but Hong Jun did not have the slightest intention of relaxing. Instead, he was extremely solemn, raising the vigilance in his mind to the highest level. As a result, the soaring serpent's attacks became even stronger and more concentrated. This was because he knew that now, the most dangerous moment of this battle had arrived. Under such dangerous pressure, Hong Jun only felt that his mind became clearer. The countless magical powers and magic arts he had learned over the past few Yuanhui, as well as the various principles of the great Tao that he had comprehended, all reappeared at this moment and attached themselves to the most suitable position in a way that seemed to change automatically, fusing with the true martial spirit transforming technique, and then manifesting on the soaring serpent, causing the phantom of the soaring serpent to become more and more powerful, more and more solid, and more agile. This also made the strange encirclement that surrounded the jelly become stronger and more mysterious. At this moment, the living space of the treasure spirit had been compressed to the limit, and it could no longer move. It finally understood that it could no longer resist the external attack, and it had reached the moment of life and death. It couldn't help but suddenly emit an aura of despair from its body. Then, when the despair reached the limit, the spiritual consciousness of the jelly formed a sudden contraction. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk from its original height of tens of thousands of feet to a sphere with a diameter of less than 10 feet. It was an extremely solid entity, and there was almost no possibility of compression. This sphere was slightly rotating according to a strange frequency, and it was constantly emitting a dangerous aura, as if it was brewing some kind of terrifying existence. Seeing this change, Hong Jun's vigilance in his heart had been raised to the limit. At the same time, he shouted in his heart, "It's coming!" With a thought, the soaring serpent that was swimming in search of an opportunity to attack suddenly turned and formed an intersecting head and tail, just like the original body of the soaring serpent in the mini-kiliocosm inside the treasure. Moreover, it began to quickly rotate and bite in a mysterious way. This was because the rotation and bite were not on the same plane, but there was some kind of subtle, according to some kind of reason. Therefore, the trajectory formed by the rotation and bite process was intertwined into a complete sphere. From all directions, up and down, left and right, it completely wrapped up the space within a radius of tens of thousands of feet. With such a change, an indescribable defensive power was born spontaneously. The sphere in the center of the soaring serpent seemed to be oppressed by an indescribable force, and it suddenly froze. Even the strange aura that it was faintly emitting seemed to be frozen. Puff puff puff, a dull muffled sound suddenly came from the inside of the sphere. It was like a strange heartbeat. Hong Jun only felt that his sea of consciousness was suddenly affected by a huge force that was expanding, as if there was some kind of terrifying power that was going to break his sea of consciousness world from the inside. The dull sound of the heartbeat became faster and louder. In the end, it was like thunder. It was emitted from the inside of the sphere and spread throughout the entire sea of consciousness world. At the same time, the sphere also began to expand and contract, as if it was a real heartbeat that was constantly beating. Then, when the heartbeat completely connected into one, like a long siren, an extremely powerful force was suddenly produced. The crackling sound of space shattering spread throughout the sea of consciousness world. Oh no! This force is actually so powerful! Hong Jun was shocked and shouted out loud. The soul shadow in the center of the sea of consciousness that was controlling the soaring serpent suddenly stomped on the ground and let out a loud roar. Ja! This roar turned into thunder, and it turned into millions of sky-blue lightning bolts. Like a waterfall, it pounced on the sphere that was wrapped by the soaring serpent and instantly drowned it. After the crackling sounds of space shattering appeared on the sphere, hundreds of millions of spiderweb-like cracks suddenly appeared all over it. An incomparably dazzling white light seeped out from the crack. Like countless sharp swords, it pierced through the space that the soaring serpent had enveloped, completely breaking the strange restraining force that existed in this space. Then, it crashed into the soaring serpent's swimming trajectory and the soaring serpent's body. As if it had collided with an iron wall, the white light stopped in that spot. However, it continued to accumulate in this space, causing the space to become brighter and brighter, and the light contained within it to become more and more dazzling. It was to the extent that the space within it gradually began to distort, and traces of spatial cracks began to appear. This was Hong Jun's sea of consciousness world. Although it had various characteristics of the real world, it was an idealistic world that existed within Hong Jun's body after all. When the space of this world was shattered and cracks appeared, it meant that Hong Jun's mind and his Taoist heart were cracked. The severity of this change was second only to the destruction of one's cultivation. At this moment, the countless sky-blue lightning bolts produced by the soul shadow's roar had already pounced over and instantly drowned the area within a radius of 10,000 miles. These lightning bolts were produced by the soul shadow, and while they contained an extremely explosive attack power, they also contained an extremely powerful recovery ability that could repair all sorts of damage suffered in the sea of consciousness world. In an instant, the spatial cracks that were torn by the white light were repaired. However, the white light was endless, and the torn space also appeared continuously. It was so fast that the lightning could not repair it, and could only allow the cracks to increase and grow larger. Chapter 259. Luo Fan's ability. The collapse of the sea of consciousness as the waste of the spirit, which looked like pan goo, suddenly bent slightly. The entire sea of consciousness shook violently. It was as if the sky and the earth had lost their support and were about to merge together. After he started cultivating the spirit of supporting heaven and earth, which was improved by Luo Fan, his goal was to become Pan Gu. By now, he had made some progress in his cultivation, and the image of his soul had roughly become Pan Gu's image, and its functions were also Pan Gu's functions. In other words, at this moment, the role of Hongjuan's spirit was to support the world. It was precisely because of this divine soul that Hong Jun's sea of consciousness could be so vast. The breadth of this sea of consciousness was already far beyond that of ordinary cultivators of the same level who had attained the Tao fruit. This was also the characteristic of all of Luo Fan's disciples, who had a sea of consciousness that was far beyond that of others. In this way, one could imagine the importance of Hongjuan's spirit. At this moment, although his spirit had only bent slightly, the impact was so great that it had already affected the entire sea of consciousness, causing the entire sea of consciousness to show signs of collapse. Pan Gu's waist was Buzhou Mountain, the primitive sky pillar. How could it bend? The situation was already quite critical, but Hong Jun did not lose his cool because of this. He just opened his mouth and let out a series of shouts, which turned into countless sky-blue lightning bolts that blasted towards the treasure spirit that had transformed into a sphere. These sky-blue lightning bolts covered the sky and covered the earth, directly covering the bright white light in that area, causing the space within a radius of 100,000 feet to turn into a faint sky blue. The crackling sound became more and more frequent and louder. Naturally, the cracks on the surface of the ball became more and more concentrated, and larger. The bright white light from within also became more and more numerous, and stronger. In the end, the light finally pierced through the sky-blue lightning bolts, and crashed into the encirclement formed by the flying serpent. The space within the encirclement could not withstand such terrifying white light at all. As it passed through and bombarded, more and more cracks appeared. The speed at which these cracks appeared had completely surpassed the repairability of the sky-blue lightning bolt. Gradually, the space within a radius of 100,000 feet turned into a giant spider web. As time passed, the lines on the spider web became thicker and thicker, and there were more and more of them. Finally, there was a loud crack. The space in an area of 30 kilometers was completely shattered into pieces, while the fragments of space surged in all directions. They interweaved with the blazing white light and sky-blue lightning, causing the area in an area of 30 kilometers to be transformed into a gray and hazy state that seemed like paste. When such a terrifying change occurred in the sea of consciousness, it was naturally reflected directly on Hongjuan's soul. This caused Hong Jun's Tao heart to become blurry and distorted. His soul, which was like an indomitable pangu, instantly knelt on the ground. Although his hands were still in the posture of supporting the sky, they were trembling slightly. As this happened, the entire world of the sea of consciousness trembled. Under the influence of an incomparably powerful pressure, the sky kept pressing down and the ground kept rising. It kept merging with the center, trying to merge together. At the same time, the surroundings of the sea of consciousness gradually shrank, its size shrinking at a rate visible to the naked eye. All these scenes showed that the entire sea of consciousness was collapsing rapidly. What kind of power is this? How can it be so terrifying? Hong Jun was shocked. At this moment, within a radius of 100,000 feet, a power that could destroy the world suddenly erupted from the extremely chaotic state that was like paste. It was as if millions of tons of atomic bombs had been detonated, producing an extremely powerful and terrifying impact. It suddenly rushed out with a power that could shatter the world. Roar, the soaring serpent that surrounded the space of 100,000 feet, was the first to bear the brunt of the impact. Under the impact, it suddenly let out a shrill dragon roar and lost its position. This was because the encirclement that it had formed with the help of various martial arts principles instantly collapsed. After the impact paused for a moment, it broke through the limit of the radius of 100,000 feet and rushed out. The scope of the impact became wider and wider. In the end, it spread to the entire sea of consciousness. Under this impact, his sea of consciousness was like a glass wall that had been hit by a bomb, producing a strange ripple that quickly spread out. After the strange ripple passed, countless tiny space fragments fluttered in the air, spreading out in all directions with the 10,000 feet diameter space as the center. The entire sea of consciousness began a process of collapse that was almost irreversible. Hong Jun forced himself to calm down. Countless information flashed in his mind and consciousness. The earthly immortal's Tao fruit suddenly collapsed and turned into a magical power that flowed rapidly and crazily in his meridians. Through some mysterious mechanism, it rushed from somewhere in his Naiwan palace into the sea of consciousness. As this magical power rushed in, a Milky Way flowed from a mysterious place into the sea of consciousness that was collapsing. Hong Jun's magical power unit was a three-dimensional talisman that was shaped like a creation jade archive. It contained infinite mysteries. Recorded in it were all the divine abilities and magic arts that he had learned and comprehended in his life. It could also be deduced to finally deduce even more profound divine abilities and magic arts that were more suitable for him. It could be said that this magical power was condensed from Hong Jun's success. At this moment, after this magical power that was like a Milky Way appeared, it circled the entire sea of consciousness to the right and suddenly exploded. It turned into countless complicated and mysterious patterns, words, and talismans. It was like a waterfall that poured down from the 9 heavens, covering the entire sea of consciousness. After the sea of consciousness began the irreversible process of collapse, Hong Jun's spirit was already lying on the ground powerlessly. His body began to weaken at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. The sea of consciousness that had lost the support of his spirit began to gradually shrink. Along with the broken pieces of space that were like glass exploding, it was like the end of the world. The countless patterns, words, and talismans that were produced by the explosion of the magical power had a very strange suppressing effect. They suppressed the shock wave that was produced by the self-explosion of the small ball with extreme force. They tried their best to reassemble the broken sea of consciousness, to reassemble it completely. These patterns, words, and talismans were the magical powers and magic arts that were engraved in the magical power unit. They were the embodiment of all the principles of the great Tao that he had learned and comprehended since he was born. And Hong Jun's Taoist heart was formed by these things. It was because he had cultivated these things that he was able to open up this sea of consciousness world. Therefore, these things had the function of suppressing and reassembling the sea of consciousness. It was a pity that the explosive power was too strong. Although this kind of suppressing power was effective, it could not suppress this explosive power at all. Why is the power of its self-explosion so strong? It is only a treasure spirit that I refined, and it is not very complete. It should be easy for me to withstand its self-explosion. Why did it cause such a dangerous result? At this moment, such a thought flashed across Hong Jun's mind, which was like lightning and thunder that could not calm down. At this moment, he had already figured out the reason for such a dangerous outcome. It was clearly because the treasure spirit of the pagoda-shaped treasure felt that there was no hope. Therefore, it would rather die than live in dishonor. It did not want Hong Jun to obtain any benefits and instinctively chose the result of self-explosion. The terrifying impact was produced by its self-explosion. Precisely because of this, Hong Jun was so surprised and felt that it was unbelievable. That's because when you refined this magic treasure, you didn't rely on a long period of time to nurture it into a magic treasure. Instead, you fused a mysterious item that failed to evolve into a magic treasure. At that moment, a calm and leisurely voice reverberated in Hong Jun's sea of consciousness. This voice was what Hong Jun wanted to hear the most at this moment, his master Luo Fan's voice. "Master, save me!" Hong Jun was overjoyed and hurriedly shouted. "Of course." Luo Fan smiled and his voice sounded leisurely. Then, an extremely mysterious, obscure, and powerful force was suddenly produced. In an instant, it brushed past his entire sea of consciousness. This power contained an inconceivably mysterious and unimaginably strong life force. This vitality was not targeted at the physical body, nor was it targeted at living beings. Instead, it targeted the mind and consciousness. It targeted the sea of consciousness. As this force brushed past, the power that was wreaking havoc in the sea of consciousness and was about to collapse the entire sea of consciousness suddenly paused. After a few breaths, it completely calmed down. The entire sea of consciousness was fixed in such a state. Most of the space had completely collapsed, and the entire area had shrunk by more than half. The originally indomitable spirit could only lie on the ground dispiritedly. It was wrapped up by the countless spatial fragments and the countless strange energies that formed a paste of chaos. There were also endless patterns, words, and talismans that enveloped every inch of space in the sea of consciousness. Whether it was a small part that was still intact or a paste of chaos, it was the same. Apart from that, there was also a vague and faintly discernible soaring serpent coiling around the entire sea of consciousness. Enduring the tremendous force of the sea of consciousness being enveloped and compressed by the dusky matter outside, the soaring serpent kept struggling and howling miserably. The mysterious item that you fused into this treasure is the product of a failed evolution of an innate god with great aptitude. It contains the innate origin of this innate god. After fusing with it, the grade of this treasure is extremely high, but the power produced by its self-explosion is equivalent to the self-explosion of an innate god with great aptitude. Naturally, it is beyond imagination. Luo Fan's voice came into Hong Jun's ears again. Then, the force turned and changed. Chapter 260. The space fragments, which had been shattered into tiny dust particles and intertwined with various strange energies, gradually gathered together as if time was flowing backward. They gradually returned to their original positions and reconstructed a more and more complete mind-sea world. In a short while, there were no more space fragments in the entire sea of consciousness. The sea of consciousness that had been mostly shattered had completely recovered. The countless messy states around Hong Jun's spirit that were like glue had completely disappeared, and the countless blazing white lights produced by the treasure spirit's self-destruction froze in half of the sea of consciousness world in an instant. It was as if a real entity had been frozen, or as if time had stopped, causing it to maintain such a strange state. Apart from that, the endless sky-blue lightning formed by Hong Jun's spirit slowly retracted and gradually returned to Hong Jun's spirit. It turned into a very mysterious existence that rushed into his mouth, turned into his spirit, and completely fused with it. With the fusion of these mysterious existences, Hong Jun's spirit seemed to have suddenly taken some miraculous elixir. In the blink of an eye, it recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. The dispirited aura in his body gradually disappeared, and his complexion became much better. There was no longer any expression of powerlessness on his face, and his body seemed to be filled with boundless power. "Thank you, Master." Hong Jun was overjoyed. How could he not know that this was a great favor from his master? He quickly thanked him. "Why say so much? Quickly establish the world." Luo Fan's voice leisurely entered Hong Jun's ears, like the evening drum and morning bell. When Hong Jun heard this, he quickly responded and climbed up with all his strength. He straightened his body with difficulty and used his hands to support the sky that was almost pressing down on his head. "Ah! Go up!" The power of heaven and earth was extremely huge. Hong Jun, who was supporting the sky with both hands, let out a loud roar. All the muscles in his body bulged, as if they were made of countless steel ingots. With a tremble, an indescribable feeling of power erupted. With his movement, the entire sky gradually lifted up. Kacha-kacha, a strange sound that seemed to contain the mysteries of the nature of heaven and earth came from every inch of space in the sea of consciousness. The entire sea of consciousness was constructed in an unprecedented and obvious way, and the mysteries of opening up were displayed in front of Hong Jun. These mysteries constantly flowed through his mind, through his perception, and finally turned into an indescribable feeling. It became the pushing force for Hong Jun's cultivation realm, pushing Hong Jun's cultivation realm up slowly. It made him feel that he seemed to have touched some kind of incredible and mysterious barrier. It felt as if he only needed a little more effort and he could easily step into a new world. He would have a new perspective to observe the whole world, and understand the unimaginable Tao. When Hong Jun compressed the jelly-like treasure spirit to the limit and the treasure spirit could not bear the pressure and self-destructed, Luo Fan, who was outside the treasure, felt that something was wrong. He knew that Hong Jun was at the moment of life and death. With a thought, He used his cultivation realm that was far higher than Hongjun's to tear apart the treasure's defense and rush into the mini-kiliacosm. The void in this mini-kiliacosm was almost endless, and Hongjun's figure was in the depths of this mini-kiliacosm. He was in an inexplicable place, emitting billions of light. The billions of light seemed to suppress the whole world as he sat in the void. When Luo Fan entered, the billions of light in this world seemed to be extremely dim. Compared to the previous peak, it was like comparing a firefly to a bright moon. There was a world of difference. It looked as if all of its power had been sucked out. As for the long-tinged snake, although its head and tail were still intertwined and it still circled around the mini-kiliacosm, it was no longer as mysterious as before. It seemed to be very reluctant, as if it had received an indescribable blow. At this time, it was just barely maintaining its posture. Luo Fan quietly floated in the depths of the mini-kiliacosm, looking at Hongjun in front of him and feeling the situation of his body. Through the various changes in the mini-kiliacosm in front of him, he felt the faint turbulence coming from everywhere. He already knew that it was the turbulence of the mini-kiliacosm caused by the collapse of the treasure spirit of this treasure. This was the moment when the mini-kiliacosm was about to collapse. It was the best time to devour the treasure spirit of this mini-kiliacosm, but it was also the most dangerous time. It could cause the entire mini-kiliacosm to collapse at any time. Luo Fan's heart moved slightly, and a faint smile appeared on his face. The earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body suddenly exploded. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a mysterious spiritual power. It suddenly rushed out of his body through the acupuncture points in his body. He raised his hand and waved gently. This spiritual power suddenly spread out and turned into countless mysterious and complicated patterns that covered the sky and the earth. They were distributed to every position in the entire mini-kiliacosm. It was like the roots of a tree locking the sand, firmly fixing the space of the entire mini-kiliacosm. Although this mini-kiliacosm was almost an independent world, it was very incomplete. Whether its size or the stability of the space, it could not be compared with the mini-kiliacosm inside the Void Wuji Palace. It was not as difficult for Luo Fan to suppress this mini-kiliacosm. Under the suppression of the patterns formed by his spiritual power, the entire mini-kiliacosm could no longer move. The turbulence that seemed to be raging inside the mini-kiliacosm instantly calmed down, as if it had never appeared. And the billions of lights that had all their power extracted and had dimmed seemed to be nourished by some mysterious power. The brightness of the light increased a little bit. Sensing this change, Luo Fan's mind turned. His mind condensed into a projection and rushed into the world of Hongjuan's Sea of Consciousness. At that time, he saw the entire Sea of Consciousness collapsing. Hongjuan's divine soul had fallen powerlessly. He could only watch the entire Sea of Consciousness step into the abyss of destruction. He sighed in his heart. He already knew that Hongjun was still trapped. If this continued, because of the existence of the innate inextinguishable spiritual light in the depths of the divine soul, Hongjun might not really die, but his Sea of Consciousness would collapse and his cultivation would definitely be damaged. It might even make the earthly immortal's Tao fruit disappear with a thought. He released his mind power. In the blink of an eye, he understood Hongjuan's thoughts and was able to put his own thoughts into Hongjuan's mind. Thus, there was the previous conversation and he could hear Hongjuan's cry for help. After getting Hongjuan's cry for help, he didn't hesitate. He directly turned his Tao Fruits Way scripture into a thought and imprinted it on the entire Sea of Consciousness. In an instant, the entire Sea of Consciousness was completely wrapped. Although the Sea of Consciousness seemed to be a real world and even had various characteristics of space, in fact, it was a kind of idealistic existence. Its foundation was Hongjuan's Tao heart, his cultivation realm, his comprehension of the Tao of heaven and earth, and the truth of nature. If he wanted to tidy up the collapsed Sea of Consciousness, He needed nothing but the comprehension of the Tao and the understanding of the mystery of heaven and earth. Although Hongjun had already achieved the Tao fruit, Luo Fan's cultivation realm was still thousands of times higher than his. This Tao fruit's way scripture was condensed from his lifetime of cultivation and represented his most original comprehension of the Tao. If he wanted to tidy up the entire sea of consciousness, the best way was, of course, to display the entire Tao fruit's way scripture in front of Hongjun like this. With the imprinting of this scripture, Hongjun didn't feel the improvement of his cultivation realm. However, the entire sea of consciousness, in a way that was visible to the naked eye, recovered. The originally collapsed space of consciousness gradually recovered. The space was reassembled and the sea of consciousness was lit up again. His godly soul also gradually recovered along with the changes in the sea of consciousness. Seeing that Hongjun's godly soul was standing upright again, Luo Fan let out a deep shout. "If I don't accept it now, when will I?" This shout was like thunder exploding in the 9 heavens, waking Hongjun up with a start. With a thought in his mind, the flying serpent, which had already turned into a wriggling mess, suddenly came back to life. With an unimaginably fast and mysterious movement, it darted towards the broken pieces of the artifact spirits, which were wrapped up by the dazzling white light, within a radius of tens of thousands of meters. Along the way, it opened its mouth and crazily swallowed the broken pieces of the treasure spirit's spiritual consciousness. With each piece being swallowed, the soaring snake became a little more spirited, its body became a little more solid, and its eyes became a little more intelligent. At the same time, with each piece being absorbed, Hongjun felt his mind become a little clearer. He felt as if there were endless mysteries of the Tao flowing through his mind and mind. He felt that he was getting closer and closer to the realm that seemed to be within reach, but also seemed to never have the chance to get close to it. The Pangu formed by the godly soul also became more and more powerful. Under its support, the entire sea of consciousness became higher and higher, and the speed at which it rose also became faster and faster. At the same time, the sea of consciousness continued to expand in all directions along with this change, and the space became bigger and bigger. Soon, the size of the space had completely returned to the size before it collapsed. Even in terms of the strength of the space, it seemed to have improved and became even more solid. Seeing this, Luo Fan's heart moved slightly, and he raised his hand and lightly beckoned. The scripture of the way, which was originally scattered all over the sea of consciousness, quickly left Hongjun's sea of consciousness and gathered towards where he was. In the blink of an eye, it gathered into a book that was 3 feet long, 5 feet wide, and 5 feet thick above his head. Every page was as thin as a cicada's wing. The words, "Scripture of the Way," which contained endless mysteries, were engraved on the cover of this book. This was the embodiment of the memories of the Tao fruit and Tao scripture that Luo Fan had organized. It contained Luo Fan's understanding of this book. If someone could obtain this book, they would definitely be able to use the fastest speed to cultivate the 12,960 volumes of the Scripture of the Way. Chapter 261. However, if Luo Fan merged this scripture into Hongjun's sea of consciousness, if Hongjun was allowed to use Luo Fan's comprehension to cultivate, then Hongjun's final achievement in the Tao fruit and way scripture would be greatly affected. To be specific, if Hongjun used the scripture that appeared in this memory to cultivate the divine ability recorded in it to the intermediate stage, then Luo Fan's comprehension contained in this scripture would become an obstacle to his progress, and it would become an obstacle that prevented him from going further and continuing to climb up on the path of Tao. In the future, Hongjun would probably have to spend hundreds or even thousands of times more time and energy to be able to push it to the peak of perfection. Even the carving and tempering of the earthly immortal Tao fruit would be greatly obstructed. Therefore, if Luo Fan directly merged this Tao fruit and way scripture into Hongjun's sea of consciousness, it could be said to be a kind of action of pulling up seedlings to help them grow, and it would do more harm than good. It was precisely because of this that Luo Fan brought out this Tao fruit and Wei scripture that was originally scattered all over his sea of consciousness, and it was gradually fusing with his entire sea of consciousness, allowing it to separate from Hongjuan's sea of consciousness and become completely independent. Hongjuan's sea of consciousness was originally able to turn around from the state of unsalvageable collapse under the suppression of the Tao fruit and Wei scripture. At this moment, after losing this extremely powerful suppression force, the entire sea of consciousness gradually lost its balance, and it suddenly started to shake more and more violently. Seeing this, Luo Fan didn't immediately have the thought of helping Hongjun stabilize the sea of consciousness. He knew that this shaking was a process that had to be experienced. The suppression of the Tao fruit and Wei scripture only played the role of a crutch to Hongjun. When a person could stand up straight and walk, this crutch naturally had to be thrown away. If he was always unwilling to leave the crutch, when could he learn to run? Hongjun sensed that the entire sea of consciousness had lost a kind of suppressive force. He sensed that the resistance was getting stronger and stronger. He sensed that the treasure spirit fragments that were scattered all over the sea of consciousness seemed to be gathering again. However, he did not panic. He understood his master's actions very well, and he was extremely grateful. That was because Luo Fan's method was even more troublesome for him. That would require Luo Fan to stand guard here for an even longer period of time, and the amount of energy he would have to expend would be even greater as well. It was far from being as convenient and easy as directly fusing the Tao fruit and the Wei scripture into the sea of consciousness. Since Luo Fan could choose this more troublesome method, it was obviously because this method was more beneficial to Hongjun. It represented his care and love for Hongjun. For the sake of his future, how could Hongjun not be grateful? Feeling grateful, Hongjun made up his mind not to disappoint his master. This time, not only did he want to completely devour the treasure spirit, but he also wanted to perfectly break through that barrier and step into a brand new realm. He wanted to obtain a breakthrough that he could not obtain for thousands of years. He wanted to achieve the second realm of the earthly immortal realm, the true immortal realm. With such a firm determination, Hongjuan's thoughts instantly became clearer. There was also an extremely powerful willpower that gushed out from his body, covering the entire sea of consciousness. As his willpower shrouded the sea of consciousness, the faint vibration of the sea of consciousness, which was trying its best to shrink, instantly collided with a force. A stalemate was formed between the two. The turbulent and swaying momentum was instantly restrained. Luo Fan's mental projection was suspended in a place where Hongjun could not see. Looking at the powerful willpower that suddenly gushed out of Hongjun, he could not help but feel very satisfied and nodded to himself. With such a mentality, he could go further on the path of seeking Tao. The soaring snake was formed by the true martial spirit transformation technique with the help of Hongjuan's martial will. Later on, he spent a lot of effort to refine it. It had already contained all the various magical powers and techniques he had learned in his life, as well as his understanding of the mysteries of heaven and earth. After his determination became firm, the soaring snake also obtained the greatest benefit. It could completely display the various magical powers and abilities that had been fused into its body for tens of thousands of years. In the blink of an eye, it had already launched countless mysterious attacks. Using all sorts of unbelievable methods, it devoured the endless spiritual consciousness fragments of the treasure spirit at an even faster speed. Creak, creak, creak. This kind of willpower and turbulence confronted each other. The process of the soaring snake devouring the treasure spirit fragments lasted for 9 days and 9 nights. After 9 days and 9 nights, the turbulence completely disappeared, and Hongjuan's willpower completely controlled the entire sea of consciousness. As for the soaring snake, it had already completely devoured the endless fragments produced by the treasure spirit's self-destruction. The entire soaring snake became extremely solid, and its size was even compressed to a length of 3 meters. This 3-meter-long soaring snake had a dragon's head and a snake's body, and its entire body was covered in fine and smooth scales. These scales were extremely lifelike, as if they were made of real flesh and scales. The soaring snake's eyes shone with an extremely intelligent light. During this period of time, there seemed to be thousands of thoughts flashing through its mind at every moment. Its body was surrounded by extremely strange clouds, and under the illumination of these clouds, the entire soaring snake constantly gave off an inconceivable and mysterious aura. All of these caused the body with a dragon's head and snake's body to not appear slightly ugly. Instead, it had an incomparably enchanting beauty. It made people feel as if they were looking at the most beautiful and enchanting thing in the world. The principles behind this were extremely mysterious and wonderful. Following this change, Hongjun suddenly felt that his thoughts were extremely smooth, and he felt extremely happy. This soaring serpent was originally under his complete control. In fact, if he wanted to, he could even treat this soaring serpent as his own body and control it. Hence, the various changes of this soaring serpent were naturally reflected in his mind. At this moment, Hongjun understood that the soaring snake formed by the true martial spirit transforming technique had completely replaced the jelly-like spiritual consciousness and had become the treasure spirit of the tower-shaped magic treasure. With the appearance of this understanding, the tower-shaped magic treasure that was suspended in the 9th layer of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer suddenly shook. In an instant, billions of rays of light were emitted from its body. These billions of rays of light were like billions of sharp swords, directly piercing through the thick astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. They broke through the barrier between the endless starry sky and the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, and penetrated the endless starry sky above, illuminating the incomparably wide starry sky. Looking down, the billions of rays of light directly pierced through the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer, and completely isolated the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer within 1,000,000 miles. Suddenly, it formed the shape of an incomparably huge ball of light. At this moment, if one stood on the ground and looked up into the void, it was as if there was suddenly an additional sun in the sky that emitted all kinds of mysterious light. With the appearance of the billions of rays of light, the image of the tower-shaped magic treasure also began to change strangely and rapidly. This change was repeated and subtle, and words could not describe it. After a short while, when people suddenly realized that the image of the magic treasure had changed, the magic treasure had already undergone an incomparably huge change. The pagoda had been transformed into a 33-story tower. Its appearance was simple and exquisite, as if it was born of heaven and earth and cast by nature. Its surface was also engraved with all kinds of mysterious lines that seemed to have been naturally generated. Whether it was the shape of the pagoda or the engraved lines on its surface, it made this pagoda seem to contain incredible mysteries, as if it contained a boundless and vast world. It even made people feel that as long as they visualized this pagoda, they could obtain incredible power and comprehend a cultivation method that was enough to cultivate to the immortality realm. Inside the pagoda, the spirit space was also divided into 33 layers because of this change. Each layer was equivalent to an incomplete minor kiliacosm. The space and the flow of time within each layer were vastly different from the other layers, as if they were completely different worlds. The space at the bottom of the pagoda was tens of millions of kilometers wide. The space here was very fragile, and as long as one reached the core formation realm, they could distort this layer of space and move it at will. The flow of time here was only 10 times faster than the outside world. From this layer up, the space in each layer of the pagoda would become smaller, the stability of the space would increase, and the flow of time would also increase. At the highest layer, the 33rd layer, the space had shrunk to only 10,000 kilometers wide. The space here was even more stable than a spirit space, and the flow of time here was 330 times faster than normal. Because of this change in space, the 100 billion creatures living in it naturally also changed. Unknowingly, before all the creatures could react, the 100 billion creatures had already been moved to the 33rd layer according to their strength. They lived and cultivated leisurely in each layer according to their strength, using a very special method to contribute their power to the magic treasure. From these characteristics, the pagoda with 33 layers was already close to Luo Fan's Void Wuji Palace to a certain extent. The pagoda has 3 layers, and is named Purple Cloud Palace. Suddenly, a leisurely voice suddenly came from the pagoda, and with the help of the billions of rays of light, it announced its existence to the entire world. This voice seemed to have substance, and it circulated around the world for a long time without stopping. Following this voice, the billions of rays of light that came from the pagoda instantly converged, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace, as if they had never appeared. At the same time, the 3 mysterious Pangu characters, Purple Cloud Palace, appeared on the plaque on the first layer of the pagoda. The soaring serpent in Hong Jun's Sea of Consciousness suddenly turned, and it rushed through a mysterious place, disappeared from Hong Jun's Sea of Consciousness, and came into his body. With another rush, it left his body and came to the 33rd layer of the magic treasure, merging with the soaring serpent's body that had coiled up, and its head and tail were connected. As it merged, the soaring serpent's body instantly trembled. It shrunk at an extremely fast speed, and in the blink of an eye, it had shrunk to the same size and appearance as the soaring serpent in Hong Jun's Sea of Consciousness. The pagoda has 3 layers, and is named Purple Cloud Palace, was naturally what Hong Jun had said. After he said that, countless spiritual lights flashed in his mind. In an instant, he felt that he had broken through the invisible barrier that seemed extremely far away, but also seemed to be within reach, and entered a brand new world. Instantly, a kind of enlightenment emerged in his mind. Chapter 262. Chapter 262. Setting up a formation in the endless starry sky. Understanding this point, a strange feeling that he was growing rapidly appeared in Hongjuan's mind and will. At the same time, he felt that his spirit was growing at a speed visible to the naked eye, growing taller and becoming stronger. In the blink of an eye, that towering spirit that supported the world of the Sea of Consciousness grew to twice its size. And with the growth of this spirit, the world of the Sea of Consciousness was also gradually expanded to twice its size. The growth of the Sea of Consciousness led to the growth of its size. In a short while, the size of the entire Sea of Consciousness had also expanded to more than twice its original size. In total, its height had increased from the original 490 miles to 980 miles, and its size had expanded from the original 4,900 miles to 9,800 miles. The terrain of the entire Sea of Consciousness was undulating, and its complexity was like the real primitive world. There were all kinds of strange things. At the same time, the supernatural power that had been distributed in various parts of Hongjuan's Sea of Consciousness and transformed into various patterns and words suddenly gathered together, forming a 3-dimensional talisman in the shape of a jade archive of creation. It formed a Milky Way in his Sea of Consciousness. With a turn and a rush, it left the Sea of Consciousness through a mysterious place. When it appeared again, it was already inside his body. It began to circulate around the meridians in his body for 81 marvelous cycles, and finally gathered in his lower abdomen, forming a mysterious earthly immortal's fruit of Wei that contained infinite power. As the earthly immortal's fruit of Wei formed in his dantian, Hongjuan's consciousness instantly left his spirit and returned to his body. With a thought, he had already left the Purple Cloud Palace with his body. Then, his perception rushed out of his body and spread in all directions with a sweeping force. More and more space was constantly brought into his mind and consciousness, and with the help of this breakthrough, he carefully understood the various mysterious mysteries between heaven and earth. As this understanding progressed, the earthly immortal's fruit of Wei in Hongjuan's body began to tremble. There was also a very strange aura coming out of the fruit of Wei. At a certain moment, just as Hongjuan's understanding of the surrounding heaven and earth increased and deepened, he felt that he had already come into contact with the great Tao that controlled the entire primitive world and all the operating principles of the great Tao. The earthly immortal's fruit of Wei suddenly expanded, and its size doubled. An incomparably terrifying suction force emerged from the Tao fruit. This suction force caused the earthly immortal Tao fruit to seem as if it had transformed into a black hole that madly absorbed all the natural spirit qi, baleful qi, star energy, chaotic spirit qi, sun true flame, grand sun essence. This suction force was too strong, causing a huge whirlpool to appear around Hongjuan's body. It kept increasing in size, becoming more and more obvious, becoming more and more shocking. Finally, the space within a radius of 1,000 miles was completely covered. Luo Fan's concealment ability far exceeded Hongjuan's perception, and it even exceeded the perception of the Dharma treasure spirit. Therefore, although Luo Fan was in the Purple Cloud Palace, Hongjun did not sense his location at all, although he knew that Luo Fan was definitely at the side. At that moment, Luo Fan saw that Hongjun had broken through the barrier and was secretly delighted. With a slight thought, the consciousness projection that was placed in Hongjuan's sea of consciousness instantly retracted. Then, he turned around and left the Purple Cloud Palace that was shaped like a Dharma treasure. At that moment, 2 items suddenly rushed out of Hongjuan's body. Among these 2 items, one of them was a yellow turban warrior. It was 10 feet tall, had yellow skin, and a yellow ribbon was wrapped around its forehead. It was wearing a silver sleeveless armor. It was barefooted, and its right hand was holding a huge and heavy golden ring. Its muscles were bulging, and it was extremely strong. It stood on the ground and looked extremely powerful. It was the yellow turban warrior emperor that Luo Fan gave to Hongjun. The other was an embroidered handkerchief that fluttered about. It seemed to be extremely tough and unbreakable, yet also seemed to be extremely weak and erratic, and it even seemed to contain boundless power and boundless profundities. Shockingly, it was the 9-spirit cloudlight handkerchief that Hongjun had refined for countless years. These 2 magic weapons had been refined to 36 layers of restrictions by Hongjun, and they had already entered the stage of transformation of the Dharma treasure. There was even a little spirituality inside. In the future, it only needed to constantly nourish and strengthen this spirituality, let these 2 spirituality continue to grow, and finally become a real spiritual consciousness. Then, these 2 magic weapons would become real Dharma treasures. By then, its power would increase by more than 100 times. And at this moment, taking advantage of the opportunity of Hongjuan's breakthrough, these 2 magic weapons with 36 layers of restrictions also gained a rare opportunity to improve, but it was possible to complete the transformation that would originally take countless years to complete. After these 2 magic weapons left Hongjuan's body, they floated 3 feet above his head, side by side with the tower-shaped Purple Cloud Palace. They slowly rotated according to some strange law, slowly rising and falling. Moreover, in this process, they were frantically attracting all kinds of special energy that was attracted by the powerful suction inside Hongjuan's body. Then, through some mysterious and wonderful method, he continuously injected it into his body, filling it with that little bit of wonderful spirituality, and growing and strengthening this little bit of spirituality. At this moment, the number of spiritual power units contained in Hongjuan's Earth Immortal Tao fruit had increased to more than 38,880. However, the energy contained in the entire Earth Immortal Tao fruit didn't increase much. Therefore, at this time, Hongjuan's Earth Immortal Tao fruit seemed to be extremely empty, crazily thirsting for energy. At this time, Luo Fan stood in the whirlpool caused by Hongjun, and his body was in a very strange state. The surrounding whirlpool and the powerful impact caused by the rapid flow of energy had no effect on him at all. No matter how fast the surrounding energy flow was, or how powerful the impact was, He floated as if nothing had happened, just like a shadow. The energy here is thin. It is not appropriate to absorb energy here to replenish the Tao fruit. It is very likely to waste this rare opportunity to break through. Luo Fan frowned slightly at this time. The place that Hong Jun chose to break through was the 9th level of the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer. In this void there were more astral wind, lightning, and fire, as well as the essence of the stars cast down from the endless starry sky above. In addition, not to mention chaotic qi, even innate qi was very rare. If Hong Jun continued to absorb energy here to replenish the earth immortal Tao fruit, he might not be able to absorb enough energy to replenish the emptiness of the magic power units when he left this rare state of breakthrough. And if he lost this rare opportunity to break through, he would probably have to spend hundreds or even thousands of times more time and energy to fill up the emptiness of the magic power units in the future. It would be quite a waste. With this thought, Luo Fan's mind moved slightly. He took a step forward, and with a flash, he had already rushed into the endless starry sky above. This endless starry sky space was very strange. Not only was it vast and boundless, but it also contained endless essence of the stars. Stepping into this place, it was pitch black around him, and the space changed. After sensing carefully and confirming that there was no mistake, golden and silver light flashed quickly in his eyes. The spiritual light in his mind was like a starry sky, constantly shining. In the blink of an eye, he had already thought through every detail of what he was going to do next. He raised his hand and waved gently. In the void, there was endless essence of the stars gathering towards him. Gradually, it condensed into extremely condensed, thin strands of energy that were like spider silk in front of him. These energy strands were psychedelic and dense. When they were piled together, it was like billions of light rays intertwining with each other. It was hazy, delicate, and blurry. As more and more essence of the stars gathered, this ball of light became bigger and bigger, and it became more and more psychedelic. When the billions of light rays expanded to a radius of 10,000 feet, countless complicated words and mysterious patterns flowed through Luo Fan's mind. As he raised his hand and waved, there were mysterious trajectories produced under his arm. With these mysterious trajectories, the energy strands in a radius of 10,000 feet instantly dispersed. Every energy strand, every trace of essence of the stars, were like the claws of an octopus, swimming and spreading in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they had spread to a radius of 10,000 miles, forming a complicated and mysterious array. After this array was formed, it suddenly produced an indescribable suction force. It sucked in the essence of the stars in the entire endless starry sky within a radius of 1,000,000 miles into this array. Then, through the movement of the formation, it followed some mysterious connection and disappeared without a trace. Luo Fan sensed the array and smiled. He turned around and rushed into the untainted world along some mysterious connection. He came to the huge whirlpool that Hong Jun had created to absorb energy. At this moment, the whirlpool had already stabilized. Even the speed of its operation was gradually slowing down. This was not difficult to understand, because, at this very moment, there was an extremely condensed and enormous amount of star essence rushing out from an unfathomable place. It was like a Milky Way that emitted a dazzling blue light, enveloping Hong Jun and the two celestial artifacts and a magic treasure above his head. This blue Milky Way was formed by the essence of the stars that Luo Fan had set up in the endless starry sky. Its quality was condensed and pure. In the process of gathering, it had been slightly refined by the array. Compared to the various kinds of energy that he had absorbed, not only was the amount sufficient, but it was also easier to absorb. With the replenishment of the energy, the surrounding whirlpool rotated slower and slower. After a while, it began to slowly shrink and gradually calm down. The essence of the stars, with the help of the powerful suction of the earthly immortal Tao fruit, directly entered Hong Jun's body and poured into the earthly immortal Tao fruit. It was scattered by the mysterious power of the earthly immortal Tao fruit, purified, and turned into pure energy that was injected into the Dharma power unit, causing the empty Dharma power unit to fill up at a speed visible to the naked eye. Chapter 263. Two artifacts into magic treasures. The Purple Cloud Palace had long since become a magic treasure. The essence energy that was absorbed into it was distributed to the 33 spaces inside it in a mysterious way. At a speed that was difficult to detect, the space inside the magic treasure gradually became complete. It could be said that for the Purple Cloud Palace, the presence or absence of the vital essence did not make much of a difference. However, for the Yellow Turban Emperor and the 9-spirit Cloud Light Handkerchief, which were still magic treasures but had already developed a bit of spirituality, encountering the vital essence of the stars was like encountering rain after a long drought. They infused the vital essence of the stars into the 2 points of spirituality in the depths of their bodies through some unimaginable changes, constantly nurturing and strengthening these 2 points of spirituality, gradually causing these 2 points of spirituality to produce some mysterious and indescribable changes. It was as if something was being nurtured within them, causing them to undergo some sort of qualitative change at any moment. When the Yellow Turban Emperor was first refined, it already had a little bit of spiritual consciousness. It could run, jump, talk, obey orders, and even carry out certain thoughts. However, this kind of spiritual consciousness was very different from a true treasure spirit. The difference was not very big in appearance, but in essence it was like the difference between heaven and earth. If this kind of spiritual consciousness was maintained and did not transform into a treasure spirit, then this magic treasure would only be a magic treasure no matter what. No matter how perfect its spiritual consciousness was, and how much it looked like a complete spiritual consciousness, it was just a fake spiritual consciousness. It was impossible for it to have the true characteristics of a spiritual consciousness, and it was even more impossible for it to improve over time. However, if this strange spiritual consciousness could transform into a true treasure spirit, the result would naturally be very different. After becoming a treasure spirit, this strand of spiritual sense would become even more agile and autonomous. Moreover, it would be able to improve as time passed and experience grew. In the end, it might even be able to transcend the shackles of a magic treasure and grow into a true living being, becoming an independent existence. Of course, this was only a possibility. If one were to seriously calculate it, it would probably take tens of millions of yuanhuas or even billions of yuanhuas before it could grow to that stage. At this moment, in the depths of Hong Jun's soul, the innate inextinguishable spiritual light that had not moved for a long time suddenly shook. It turned into a gray light that rushed out of his soul, out of the sea of consciousness world, and then came 3 feet above his head through the top of his head. In an instant, it had already wrapped the magic treasure and the 2 magic treasures in a gray light. Following this change, the 2 magic tools and the magic treasure seemed to have gained some kind of power, and the speed at which they absorbed the star essence increased by more than 10 times. Furthermore, the mysterious changes that were happening inside the 2 magic tools were becoming more and more obvious and even more massive. The transformation of the spirituality became faster, and the feeling of something being nurtured became even more obvious. Luo Fan raised his eyes to take a look. Amidst the flickering golden and silver lights, he seemed to see an invisible silk cocoon forming inside each of the 2 magical tools, gradually wrapping around the 2 spirituality like eggs, gradually concealing the changes within. At this moment, Hong Jun's mind had already entered a mysterious state where there was no one and no me. As for the changes of the 2 magic tools and the magic treasure, he was completely unaware. At this moment, his mind was filled with an indescribable joy. He only felt that there was endless great Tao constantly flowing through his mind and directly pouring into his soul. This strange feeling made him feel as if everything he saw and felt in his heart was undergoing earth-shattering changes. There were endless mysteries of heaven and earth unreservedly displayed in front of him, and the endless chi of heaven and earth was quickly connecting with him. It was as if he could do everything that he needed to do with his full strength in the past with just a wave of his hand. The connate inextinguishable spirit light was extremely mysterious. Not only did it contain the mystery of connate indestructibility, but it also contained the essence of the evolution of creation. Being enveloped by it was equivalent to being influenced by the essence of the evolution of creation. It was equivalent to using the connate inextinguishable spirit light as a medium to connect with the heavenly Tao of creation, causing the speed of transformation to continuously accelerate. 3 days and 3 nights passed. An extremely strange wave suddenly burst out from inside the 2 magic tools. This wave was invisible and seemed to be just a flow of information, but it fluctuated slightly like a heartbeat. It trembled slightly like a strange heartbeat. Luo Fan stood in the void and looked at this change. He was also quite curious. After all, although he had refined several magic tools and seen the birth of several treasure spirits, it was the first time he saw a magic tool naturally become a magic tool. As for what changes would occur, and what kind of mysterious mysteries would be revealed, he could not guess at all. At this moment, a very strange sound came from the 2 magic tools. This sound was like the sound of a life breaking out of an eggshell. It was also like the sound of bones colliding after a life left its mother's body for the first time. It was mysterious and difficult to describe with words. Hearing this sound, the golden and silver light in Luo Fan's eyes suddenly increased by more than 10 times. In an instant, he saw through all the appearances of the 2 magic tools, and every subtle change in the depths of the 2 magic tools. In an instant, he vaguely saw the 2 invisible cocoons shatter with a bang. 2 phantoms passed through the invisible barrier, completely absorbed the fragments of the silk cocoons, and descended into the world. The phantom that appeared inside the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief was the image of a cricket. It was illusory yet real, and it was erratic. It was very similar to Hongjuan's body. The phantom that appeared inside the yellow turban Hercules Emperor was in the form of a human, and its image was exactly its appearance. However, its eyes seemed extremely pure and clear, like a baby that didn't understand anything and was curious about everything. So that's how it is. It turns out that there is still a growing process before it can transform into a human form. There really is a lot of mystery in it. Luo Fan couldn't help but admire in his heart when he saw it. How high was his cultivation realm? Naturally, he knew at a glance that these 2 phantoms were the prototype of the treasure spirit of the magic tool. If not strictly speaking, they could already be regarded as the treasure spirit of the magic tool. The reason why these 2 treasure spirits would have such a strange appearance, unlike the magic tools that Luo Fan refined, which directly appeared in the form of a boy, was because these 2 treasure spirits were born out of thin air. They needed to grow slowly from nothingness. Luo Fan's mind was silent. Thousands of mysterious lights flashed in his mind, and the creation volume of the Tao Fruits Way scripture was instantly filled up a little. Sensing this change, Luo Fan was even happier, and the admiration on his face became even more intense. At this moment, the innate inextinguishable spirit light that had appeared for 3 days and 3 nights spat out the 3 magic tools. It shrank back into Hongjuan's body from the top of his head and re-entered the world of his sea of consciousness. It rushed straight into the depths of his soul, curled into a ball, and no longer moved. The 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief and the yellow turban Hercules Emperor had just become magic tools, and it was the perfect opportunity for them to transform. Although they had already lost the shroud of the innate inextinguishable spirit light, the absorption of the star essence did not decrease. Instead, it increased by more than 100 times. In an instant, it completely cut off the blue sky river that descended from the sky and enveloped the yellow turban Hercules Emperor, the 9-spirit cloud light handkerchief, the purple cloud palace, and Hongjun. It directly pulled all the star essence contained in the Sky River into the magic tool, so that Hong Jun could no longer absorb any star essence to replenish his mana units. With this change, Hong Jun instantly woke up from that mysterious state where there was no one and no me. With a slight thought, the changes in the past 3 days and 3 nights instantly appeared in his mind. Understanding these changes, an indescribable joy suddenly appeared in his heart. I didn't expect that there would be 2 magic tools that became magic tools one after another. The great Tao is within reach, the great Tao is within reach. Such a thought echoed in Hongjuan's mind. Although the process of cultivation was interrupted. At this moment, not only had he completely consolidated the true immortal realm of the earthly immortal fruit of Wei, the energy in the earthly immortal fruit of Wei had already been enriched by more than 60%. Although this was still not perfect, it was already extremely rare, allowing him to shorten at least a few thousand years of cultivation time. At this moment, through some kind of inconceivable connection, Hong Jun was able to sense the existence of 3 strange spiritual consciousnesses. Those were the treasure spirits of the 3 magic tools. Among these 3 strands of spiritual consciousness, one was very complete and already had thoughts and emotions that were not inferior to his. The other 2 were like infants. Although they had already taken shape, their thoughts and emotions were still very imperfect. They needed a long period of nurturing before they could truly grow. When he sensed these 3 spiritual consciousnesses through that mysterious connection, the 3 spiritual consciousnesses sensed his existence at the same time. Waves of joy and admiration were transmitted into his mind through that mysterious connection, making him feel as if he had drunk fine wine. His mood became extremely comfortable, and an intoxicated smile appeared on his face. Suddenly, he remembered that a few days ago, the power of his master had come to save his life. He couldn't help but be shocked. Looking around, he saw Luo Fan, who had come to stand quietly in front of him with a faint smile on his face. Unfilial disciple Hong Jun greets master. Thank you for saving my life. Hong Jun hurriedly knelt in the void and bowed. Luo Fan shook his head slightly and said, You and I are master and disciple. You don't have to be so polite. It's just that you were too reckless this time. If I hadn't predicted that something was wrong and rushed over, I'm afraid your cultivation would have been ruined. I don't know if there would be a chance for you to recultivate in the future. You must not do this in the future. Master, you are right. I will not be so reckless in the future. Hong Jun was sweating all over and said. Chapter 264. When he saw Hong Jun, he talked about the Great Tribulation. At the same time, with a wave of his hand, endless wind, thunder, and fire gathered and formed a cloud under his feet. It lifted the 2 of them up and gave them some support. Although standing in the air was normal for Luo Fan and Hong Jun, it was quite strange for the 2 of them to bow in the air. The cloud was extremely stable, soft, and tough. It had an extremely strong supporting force. It felt wonderful to step on it. Hong Jun was helped up by Luo Fan. He first kept the 3 magic treasures floating above his head into his sea of consciousness. Then, he carefully put his strength aside. After Luo Fan comforted Hong Jun with a smile, he did not waste any time and directly told Hong Jun about the Great Tribulation of Primordial World. Hong Jun was his eldest disciple. Compared to the other innate gods, he was much closer to him. Moreover, he had already advanced to the perfected immortal realm. In terms of strength and cultivation, he was already far stronger than the other innate gods. He could even be considered the second person in the primordial world. No matter how one looked at it, he had already become the main force to deal with the great tribulation of primordial world. Under such circumstances, he naturally would not hide anything from Hong Jun. Therefore, in just a few words, he had already explained the matter of the great tribulation of primordial world to Hong Jun clearly. Moreover, what he said was unprecedentedly detailed. After he finished speaking, Hong Jun's understanding of the Great Tribulation of primordial world was no less than that of Luo Fan. It had long surpassed all the innate gods, including Yusu and Fen Tian. Hong Jun had just achieved a breakthrough in his nature and was filled with joy. Suddenly, he heard about the Great Tribulation. He was both shocked and enlightened. He was naturally shocked that such a widespread Great Tribulation had appeared so quickly in the primordial world. He suddenly understood the origin of the sense of urgency in his mind before he devoured the treasure spirit. "Master, please tell me how to deal with this Great Tribulation." Coming back to his senses, Hong Jun decisively knelt down and pleaded to Luo Fan. Although he had cultivated to such a level, Hong Jun still admired Luo Fan. Luo Fan smiled. Although his smile couldn't be considered peerless, it had a comforting power. Under the comfort of this smile, the urgency on Hong Jun's face lessened a little, and he was no longer as nervous as before. Seeing that Hong Jun's expression was slightly calm, Luo Fan helped Hong Jun up and said, "This matter is not urgent. Although the Great Tribulation of the untainted land was dangerous, it was also an opportunity. The primordial world is so vast. There is naturally a price for us to take such resources. The primordial world calamity was the embodiment of such a price. If he couldn't overcome it, he would naturally die and all the resources he had obtained would return to the heavens and earth. If he survived this calamity, he would obtain the recognition of the primordial world. Not only could he continue to obtain the endless resources of the primordial world, but he could also obtain the invisible blessing of the great Tao. In the future, it would be much easier to cultivate and comprehend the Tao. I see. May I ask, Master, is there a fixed number of great tribulations? After hearing Luo Fan's words, Hong Jun suddenly felt enlightened, as if he had already grasped some essence. He quickly took the opportunity to ask. Of course there is a fixed number. It's just that this fixed number is profound and difficult to understand, and it's not something that we can understand now. After all, I've only obtained the Earth Immortal Tao fruit. I'm still at the beginning of the Immortal Tao cultivation. How can I comprehend such a thing that involves the essence of heaven and earth? It's already a rare opportunity to be able to comprehend the source of the Great Tribulation. Luo Fan sighed. When Hong Jun heard Luo Fan's words, although he was slightly disappointed, he felt an indescribable feeling in his heart. This feeling was fulfilling. He knew Luo Fan's ability better than anyone else, and he trusted him more than anyone else. And now, even Luo Fan said that he had just started his journey, so one could imagine how long the road ahead would be. Hong Jun's Taoist heart was not inferior to Luo Fan's. He knew that the road ahead was long, but he didn't feel dispirited. Instead, he had endless fighting spirit. He felt that there was an endless road ahead, so he had endless fighting spirit. Luo Fan didn't have any psychological barrier to admitting his shortcomings in front of his disciple. Although Hong Jun's expression changed slightly, he could easily see through his thoughts. At this moment, a faint smile appeared on his face and he said, "You don't need to worry about this for the time being. In the future, when your cultivation realm improves, you will be able to sense the existence of such a tribulation. Now that you've become a true immortal, you have 3 magic treasures to refine, but you need to spend a long time to consolidate your cultivation. Fine, I'll cultivate with you for 10,000 years. 10,000 years later, you come to Buzhou Mountain to see me, and I'll talk to you about how to prepare for this great tribulation." At this moment, Luo Fan's expression suddenly changed, as if he sensed something, and his eyes showed a thoughtful expression. "Yes, Master." Hearing Luo Fan's command, Hong Jun's face turned solemn, and he bowed. "In that case, you cultivate well and don't slack off. I'm leaving." Luo Fan straightened up his expression, nodded, and said, "I won't dare to slack off. Goodbye, Master." Although Hong Jun was reluctant to let Luo Fan leave, he still bowed. Luo Fan smiled slightly, turned his body, and turned into a dark green light, shooting straight to the southeast direction away from Buzhou Mountain, leaving a tens of thousands of feet long afterimage in the air. Seeing that Luo Fan had gone far away, Hongjuan's eyes revealed a kind of envy. After a long time, he finally calmed himself down, raised his hand, and pointed between his eyebrows, and a 10-feet-long ting snake with a dragon head and a snake body rushed out from between his eyebrows. It turned in the air, and condensed into a 33-story mysterious pagoda in front of him. Seeing this, Hongjun was not surprised. He took a step forward, and his body shrank rapidly. In the blink of an eye, he had entered the 33rd floor of the pagoda, a space where the flow of light was 330 times faster than the untainted world. The Ting snake was originally the product of Hongjuan's cultivation of the true martial spirit transformation method. It could be said to be a projection of Hongjuan's consciousness, a clone. After it devoured the treasure spirit of this magic treasure, although its existence had changed, it still could not change its true nature. It was still connected to Hongjuan's mind. Therefore, Hongjun naturally did not need to use words to command it like the magic treasures that Luo Fan refined. Stepping into the 33rd floor of the Purple Cloud Palace, Hongjuan's mind moved slightly. The Yellow Turban Hercules Emperor and the 9-spirit Cloud Light Handkerchief suddenly rushed out of his sea of consciousness. They floated 3 feet above his head, emitting a mysterious light. After the 2 magic treasures left his body, under Hongjuan's control, the innate inextinguishable spiritual light in the depths of his divine soul also rushed out of his body. It condensed into a 1-acre magic cloud 3 feet above his head, rolling slightly, dragging the 2 mysterious magic treasures. As the magic cloud formed by the innate inextinguishable spiritual light rose, there seemed to be mysterious information coming in and out of the 2 magic treasures, as if they were communicating with the innate inextinguishable spiritual light. The interior was still very incomplete, and the treasure spirit that was still like a baby was growing at an undetectable speed, gradually becoming complete. After doing this, Hongjuan's mind moved slightly. He controlled the Purple Cloud Palace to flash, and it quickly flew towards a 200,000 feet tall mountain diagonally below. Although the speed was not as fast as the rainbow that Luo Fan had transformed into, it was more than 10 times faster than his own flying speed. In a short while, the Purple Cloud Palace had crossed a distance of tens of thousands of miles and arrived in front of a cave that was emitting a dense chaotic aura halfway up the mountain. With a turn and a dash, the Purple Cloud Palace rushed straight into the cave and arrived above a huge chaotic aura source. This chaotic aura source was quite huge and extremely condensed. Although it was only 10,000 feet in diameter, the amount of chaotic aura inside it was no less than that of a normal chaotic aura source with a diameter of 100 miles. After arriving here, the Purple Cloud Palace rotated slightly. The chaotic aura source trembled slightly, and all the chaotic aura it emitted gathered together, turning into a long river that flowed straight into the top of the pagoda. Then, it flowed down from the top and gradually enveloped the entire pagoda. At that moment, Hongjun felt a chaotic aura flow descending from the sky like a heavenly pillar. It directly wrapped around his body, and then rushed into his body through the acupuncture points all over his body. Seeing this, Hongjuan's mind moved slightly. The complicated and mysterious mantra of the method of supporting heaven and earth flowed through his mind. The earthly immortal's fruit of Wei in his body exploded with a bang, turning into mana. It began to circulate in his meridians according to the method of supporting heaven and earth. Under this change, the chaotic aura that entered Hongjuan's body was quickly twisted and refined into extremely pure energy. Then, it was completely devoured by the mana, replenishing the still somewhat empty and incomplete mana unit. Because of this, Hongjun gradually entered the cultivation state of no one and no self. This magic treasure could accelerate time by more than 330 times. Luo Fan had given him 10,000 years of cultivation time. In real terms, he had 3,300,000 years, which was equivalent to more than 20 to 30 yuan hui. This short period of time seemed to be extremely long, but compared to the cultivation of the earthly immortal's fruit of Wei, this period of time was not too long. If he did not seize the time, perhaps in the blink of an eye, this seemingly long period of time would pass just like that. Just as he entered this cultivation state of no one and no self, there seemed to be countless complex characters and mysterious patterns appearing in the world of his consciousness. They seemed to be intertwining with each other, as if they were narrating some kind of indescribable truth of the great Tao. Those were the traces left behind by Luo Fan's Tao fruit of the Wei in his Sea of Consciousness. Chapter 265. After comprehending his past life, the fruit of Tao improved greatly. After leaving Hongjun, Luo Fan flew towards the southeast. In other words, he kept moving away from Buzhou Mountain and towards the depths of the untainted land. The reason why he chose not to return to his cave abode was because when he was talking to Hongjun about the predetermined number of the Great Calamity, he suddenly felt a surge of inspiration. It was as if something had triggered a spark in his heart, allowing him to sense that somewhere in the depths of the untainted land there was a certain existence that was closely related to him. If he obtained it, it would bring him countless benefits. It was precisely because of this that he ended his conversation with Hongjun. He turned around and flew towards the location that he sensed. What exactly is it? Could it be something that's helpful to the Great Calamity? Luo Fan thought to himself, but he felt rather expectant. When he turned into a ray of light, he did not retract his great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes. As they rotated slightly, the scenery of the untainted land that he passed through was constantly absorbed into his mind. The current Luo Fan could already be said to be very knowledgeable. He had seen the heavens and the earth, overturned rivers and seas, and created and destroyed worlds. However, the mysteriousness and magnificence of nature would always exceed anyone's imagination. In particular, the direction that he had chosen to advance was gradually deep into the untainted land. In these locations, the chaotic vitality could no longer occupy an absolute advantage. The influence of other vitality, energy, and essence on the natural landscape became more and more obvious. As a result, the various changes in the untainted land naturally became more and more magnificent and mysterious, more and more beyond the imagination of living beings. Therefore, in the process of flying, Luo Fan still discovered that there were many wonderful sceneries below that he had never seen before, and even more so, he had never heard of them before. The mysterious beauty was simply indescribable. In this situation, even if Hongjun had something on his mind and was looking forward to the item that was connected to him, he could not help but feel that he had gained a lot. He felt that his horizons had been broadened, and his mood could not help but become better. Luo Fan's speed did not decrease. He turned into a ray of light in the void and flew at an extremely fast speed. This dark green rainbow left behind a long afterimage in midair, directly piercing through the sky like a sharp blade piercing through the void. As he flew, all kinds of yuan qi, all kinds of baleful aura, and all kinds of energy came rushing at him. The scenery around him flashed by quickly, and the whole world gradually became blurry in his eyes. The difference between up and down, left and right, and the difference between heaven and earth seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. Suddenly, everything his eyes saw, his ears heard, and his heart felt had transformed into a boundless great freedom. Great freedom! Inexplicably, countless ancient memories suddenly resurfaced in the depths of his memory. In a trance, he seemed to have once again experienced his previous life. He did not know if it was in the incomparably distant future or in the incomparably distant other side of space and time on Earth, where he lived for more than 20 years. Birth, growth, joy, sorrow, he constantly re-experienced the muddle-headed, shameless life that was bound by the shackles of the secular world. He recalled the various thoughts he had in that state of life and the various joys he had in the past. A very complicated feeling filled his mind. Luo Fan had never felt as powerful as he did now. This kind of strength was not the strength of strength, but the strength of the mind. Compared to the time when he was on Earth, the present Luo Fan, whether it was in the state of survival or the essence of life, was many times better. His world was many times wider than it was back then. He even felt that he was now truly alive, and the feeling that everything before was just a dream surged in his mind. From the moment a person is born, they are bound and distorted by countless worldly restrictions. As a result, they gradually lose their own heart, and become living in the eyes of others, becoming no longer themselves. To truly live out one's self and release one's heart, one must possess great power. Such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. An inexplicable feeling gradually emerged in his mind. In the blink of an eye, Luo Fan seemed to understand many truths that he did not understand before, but after a careful search, it seemed that he did not understand anything. With the appearance of this wonderful feeling, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his body suddenly shook slightly, and the magical power units inside the earthly immortal's Tao fruit suddenly split at a rapid speed. In the blink of an eye, the number of three-dimensional talismans in the earthly immortal's Tao fruit had more than doubled, and the number of three-dimensional talismans had increased to 1,036,800, breaking the number of millions. As the number of magical power units increased, the energy inside these magical power units naturally dispersed along with the increase in number. As a result, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit had fallen from its original peak of perfection to less than 50%. Even the strange patterns that contained infinite mysteries that were outlined by various kinds of strange energy inside each magical power unit had become a little dimmer. This change happened very abruptly. In the blink of an eye, when Luo Fan suddenly realized that a change had occurred in his body, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit had grown a lot bigger, and the number of three-dimensional talismans inside it had more than doubled. Ha ha ha! Sensing the change in his body, Luo Fan was in a very good mood, and could not help but laugh out loud. With a thought, the speed of the rainbow suddenly increased, and it easily increased by more than 10 times. In the blink of an eye, it left a million zhang long afterimage in the air, and streaked across the sky at high speed. During this process, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit trembled slightly like a heart. Endless kinds of yuan qi, all kinds of evil qi, all kinds of essence qi, and all kinds of energy were constantly pouring into his body through a mysterious method, and then, through some mysterious and wonderful method, they were completely devoured by his earthly immortal's Tao fruit, turning into extremely pure energy that completely filled the magical power units that had become empty, replenishing their energy, and causing the mysterious patterns inside to shine brightly again. Such a rapid flow of energy created a huge whirlpool around his body. Its momentum had already reached an unimaginable level, and it looked like there was a ball with a diameter of hundreds of millions of zhang flying in the air. The loud rumbling sound spread from the air after Luo Fan's escape light flew for dozens of breaths, and it produced an extremely unimaginable momentum that shook the world. The sound was naturally the sound produced by the surging of yuan qi and energy. The sound was quite mysterious, and it lingered for 3 days. After a day, Luo Fan pressed down the dark green rainbow, and his figure condensed in the void. This place was more than 30 billion miles away from where Hong Jun was, and it was no less than 100 billion miles away from Buzhou Mountain. Luo Fan came here, stood in the void, and looked down, only to see a huge sinkhole below. It was only 1,000 miles in diameter, but it was tens of thousands of miles deep. This is it, but I don't know what it is that can make me have such a strange feeling, Luo Fan thought. On this day, he had completely grasped the changes in his strength after the transformation of the earthly immortal fruit of Wei. After the increase of the magical power units, Luo Fan's cultivation realm was still at the golden immortal realm of the earthly immortal fruit of Wei. He could seek for the Tai fruit of Wei, but there was still a long way to go. If he went to seek for it now, the success rate would be so low that it made people's hair stand on end. This feeling made him sigh at the difficulty of seeking for the tai fruit of Wei. However, even though he was far from achieving the tai fruit of Wei, after a series of experiments, he still found that his strength was now several times stronger than before the growth of the magical power unit. Many things that he needed to exhaust his energy and a huge amount of energy to achieve in the past, now he only needed to use a little bit of strength. Just like the earthly immortal heaven escape formation. If he were to set up this formation to deduce the Pangu chaotic heavenly pupil now, then he wouldn't need to spend a few months, and he would only need less than 10 days to succeed. Moreover, the energy consumed was at least 100 times less than before. From this, it could be seen how great his progress was. In addition, his perception ability and deduction ability had also been greatly improved. It was because of this that Luo Fan could so easily deduce that the thing that triggered his impulse and was infinitely beneficial to him was in the giant pit below. Luo Fan stood in the void, and there seemed to be a faint depression in his body. Endless energy constantly surged toward him from all directions, and then he swallowed it all without reservation, constantly replenishing the magical power units in his body that had become quite empty. This replenishment speed is really too slow. Luo Fan's heart moved slightly. He raised his hand and swiped in the void, then a stone door of 1 meter high appeared in the void. He raised his hand to push the stone door open, and an extremely rich chaotic chi gushed out from it. With the help of the strong suction produced by his body, it rushed into his body. Feeling the chaotic chi entering his body, Luo Fan could not help but show a look of intoxication. He put his hands together in the void, and the door instantly shrank to the size of a fist. It rushed into the position of his lower abdomen where the dantian was. In the blink of an eye, it had already arrived in his dantian, and floated below the earthly immortal Tao fruit. The chaotic chi that gushed out went straight into the earthly immortal Tao fruit, and was crushed by the millions of magical power units in it, then purified, and then charged into the magical power units. This door was the door that Luo Fan created with the help of turning false into real. It was not much different from the door that he used to move through space with the help of the illusory world. It was just that it was simpler and more stable. The other door opposite this door was the depths of the sea of liquefied chaotic chi at the top of Buzhou Mountain. The chaotic chi in the depths of the sea of liquefied chaotic chi entered an illusory world through that door, and then came to Luo Fan's dantian through the door of the illusory world, and was directly absorbed by the earthly immortal Tao fruit. The whole process was much easier than crossing with his real body, but it required greater stability. Chapter 266. The strange sinkhole and the opportunity of the talisman ghost. With this tiny door in his dantian that turned the fake into the real, Luo Fan would be able to casually absorb the boundless chaotic energy on top of Mount Buzhou to fill his earthly immortal Tao fruit no matter where he was. In this way, it was equivalent to cultivating at all times. Luo Fan floated in the void tens of thousands of feet above the sinkhole for a while. Then, with a thought in his mind, he turned into a streak of light and rushed down into the sinkhole. After a while, he had already rushed into the sinkhole. As soon as he entered the sinkhole, he felt a very strange pressure around him. Even if he turned into a rainbow, it was difficult to isolate this strange pressure. This kind of pressure was not very strong, but it directly targeted his divine soul, directly targeted his mind and thoughts. Under the oppression of this pressure, he even felt that his divine soul was not very agile anymore. With this feeling, Luo Fan was not surprised but happy. This strange feeling proved that this was not an ordinary sinkhole. It was very likely that the few things that were very attractive to him were here. With that thought in mind, Luo Fan instantly raised his perception to the peak, incorporating all the details of his surroundings into his mind. He carefully observed all the changes in his surroundings in his mind. As he observed, he gradually found more abnormalities in the sinkhole. This sinkhole was not born naturally. Judging from the smooth marks of the friction of the heavy objects around it, this sinkhole should have been formed by a huge spherical object falling from the sky and directly smashing the ground. This thing must be quite mysterious. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to smash open such a tough ground in the great wasteland and smash it so deep. Moreover, the ground within the range of this heavenly pit seems to have been completely devoured, leaving nothing behind. This is not something that can be done by an ordinary object, Luo Fan muttered to himself. While he was thinking, his figure soon arrived at a depth of 4,900 kilometers underground. He raised his eyes and scanned his surroundings. He saw a faint yellow glow on the wall of the cave opposite him. These yellow lights were not solid ground, but seemed to be filled with some kind of liquid. After carefully perceiving, Luo Fan had already discovered that these lights were actually the light of the yellow spring water. And these liquid, impressively, were the yellow spring water. Curious, he stopped the rainbow, condensed his body, and floated in front of the yellow light. He raised his eyes, and the golden and silver light in his eyes flickered rapidly, tracing back to the original. After a short while, he already knew that there happened to be a branch of the yellow spring flowing here. After the strange thing smashed down, the branch of the yellow spring was smashed into a big pit, and the flow was cut off from here. And after that thing smashed down, it left a mysterious aura in this sinkhole. The mysterious aspect of this aura was that it could make the incomparably mysterious yellow spring unable to fill up this deep pit again, and even unable to break away from the wall of this cave. Therefore, this scene of a faint yellow brilliance appearing on the wall of the sinkhole was formed. Luo Fan looked carefully, and knew that this branch of the yellow spring was only an extremely small branch of the yellow spring. It was actually only a few dozen miles wide and a little more than 100 miles deep. Compared to the main stream of the yellow spring, it was almost too small to be cleaned up. It could be said that this was the smallest branch of the yellow spring that Luo Fan had ever seen. Suddenly, with a thought, Luo Fan suddenly felt that something was attacking the back of his head. This thing seemed to be very weak, and its size was only the size of a fist, but it carried a powerful momentum, and its attack was also quite strange. It directly drew a rather delicate trajectory from behind and pounced towards him. In the blink of an eye, it had already pounced on the back of his head, and was about to drill into his skull. Luo Fan frowned, and with a wave of his hand, an invisible force appeared, and stopped the creature that was attacking him from behind. He raised his hand to grab it, and the thing was already in front of him. Looking closely, it was the size of a fist, and it was pitch black. It looked like a black hole that was constantly absorbing light. After this small ball entered Luo Fan's hand, it struggled wildly, and shook with all its might. There was also a faintly discernible spiritual sense that was constantly conveying an angry and crazy thought. Luo Fan was slightly surprised, and the great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes deeply analyzed this ball. In the blink of an eye, he already knew what this thing was. It's actually the object of the transformation of the invisible talisman ghost. It seems that this sinkhole can be called the place of all the opportunities of the invisible talisman ghost. Luo Fan sighed. He raised his hand and made a grabbing motion. A formless scream penetrated his mind and consciousness. He had already crushed the thing in his hand into pieces, turning it into wisps of energy that scattered in all directions. With a wave of the surrounding primordial chi, it had already disappeared without a trace. This sinkhole was directly connected to the ground, and it was filled with all kinds of primordial chi, stellar essence chi, and other kinds of energy that were not in the yellow springs. In addition, this sinkhole directly passed through the yellow springs. This allowed the invisible talisman ghost in the yellow springs to come into contact with all kinds of mysterious energy in the untainted world through this place. As mentioned earlier, the invisible talisman ghost was condensed from heavy turbid chi. If it came into contact with the primordial chi and stellar evil of the outside world, it would cause some kind of transformation in its nature. In the end, it would transform into another kind of life, a kind of life that had a complete spiritual sense, could survive in the untainted world, and could have a bright future. The thing that attacked him previously was such a kind of life after the transformation of the invisible talisman ghost. However, the energy that combined with the invisible talisman ghost was a kind of mystic water heavenly spirit. This kind of mystic water heavenly spirit contained the true meaning of freezing and destruction. Although it could transform the life essence of the invisible talisman ghost and allow it to have a complete spiritual sense, it also caused it to be contaminated with the mystic water heavenly spirit's extreme freezing and destructive intent. Therefore, the invisible talisman ghost pounced on and attacked Luo Fan the moment they saw Luo Fan. It's a pity that this is a tributary. Luo Fan felt slightly regretful. At this moment, a black shadow that was constantly changing between real and illusory emerged from the yellow springs. At this moment, Luo Fan suddenly felt like he was being spied on. Then, the black shadow exploded and tried its best to come into contact with the primordial chi of the outside world. It suddenly seemed to have turned into a black hole and was trying its best to absorb it. During this process, there was a mysterious wave that was constantly emitting from the black fog that the black shadow exploded. There was even an inexplicable vitality that was faintly being born within it. After a while, the black fog condensed and turned into a small, fist-sized Luo Fan. This small Luo Fan floated in the air with clear eyes, as if he was very curious about everything. Goo Goo then, it seemed to have discovered Luo Fan. It kept cooing and opened its arms to pounce on Luo Fan. A joyful and pure smile appeared on its face. Luo Fan looked at it and shook his head. He knew that this was an invisible talisman ghost that was lucky enough to come out of the yellow springs. With the help of the surrounding primordial chi, it combined with the heavy turbid talisman in its core and underwent a mysterious transformation. In the end, it became a real living creature. The reason why it had taken on Luo Fan's appearance was because Luo Fan had become the template for the formless rune ghost's transformation. As a result, the formless rune ghost could only construct its body according to Luo Fan's appearance. The heavy turbid chi was the most turbid chi in the primordial world. Compared to it, all the energy in the world could be considered as yang. Although innate chi was only neutral, when combined with the heavy turbid chi, it was equivalent to the combination of yin and yang. When clear and turbid intersected, it would naturally produce all kinds of mysterious changes and give birth to endless vitality. Since you have shaped your body according to my figure, it can be said that you are fated with me. Fine, I will give you an opportunity. Luo Fan shook his head and raised his hand to touch the forehead of the fist-sized humanoid figure. A bit of spiritual light rushed into the figure's forehead along with his touch. It instantly combined with the newly born and extremely pure spiritual consciousness and turned into a large amount of memories. As the memories fused, the little person's eyes showed a look of confusion and contemplation. After a while, an indescribable light was emitted from its body. During this time, endless innate chi gathered from all directions and kept entering its body. It kept nourishing its essence, causing its body to swell slightly. The large amount of memories formed by the spiritual light just now was a basic cultivation technique that Luo Fan had specially created for the life in front of him. This technique was rather simple. When cultivated to its peak, it was only at the divine fire realm. It was far inferior to the cultivation technique that Luo Fu and the others cultivated. Although Luo Fan had countless secrets, he was not a selfless Lei Feng. Taking advantage of the fact that the creature was absorbing innate chi to strengthen itself, Luo Fan raised his hand and slapped it. The creature instantly disappeared into the void. When it reappeared, it was already somewhere tens of millions of miles away. Luo Fan had sent it away with the help of the illusory and corporeal transformation technique. Seeing that the creature had disappeared, Luo Fan calmed down. He turned around and continued to sink downwards. However, he did not know. After the creature he had sent away woke up, it looked around and called out in a rather aggrieved voice, "Father! Father!" Perhaps it was an innate instinct, or perhaps it was set by the laws of the world. This creature was formed using Luo Fan as a template. As soon as it was born, the thought that Luo Fan was its father was engraved in its spiritual consciousness. At this moment, it suddenly saw that its father had disappeared and it appeared in an unfamiliar place. How could it not be shocked? Relying on its natural ability to fly, it wandered around within a radius of several thousand miles and searched for several years. Finally, it found that it could not find its father. After crying loudly, it found a cave and entered it. It worked hard to cultivate the only mysterious technique that its father had left for it in its spiritual consciousness. It hoped that when it became stronger in the future, it would be able to find its father. Furthermore, he even gave himself a name, Father Seeker. Chapter 267. Strange stars and geomagnetic true power. At this moment, Luo Fan did not know that he had another son. After he left that place, he went down bit by bit. It was enough for what happened just now to happen once. If it happened a few more times, Luo Fan would not be able to bear it. The Yellow Spring was 4,900 miles above the ground, and the pit was more than 10,000 miles deep. There was still more than half of the depth to the bottom of the pit. As he went down, the strange pressure on his spirit and mind became more and more obvious and stronger. By the time he arrived at the bottom of the pit, which was thousands of miles deep, this pressure had already become substantial. From all directions it pressed down on all the creatures that had invaded this place. Luo Fan. Fortunately, it was Luo Fan who came here. If it was any other innate god, his consciousness might have already stagnated and turned into a walking corpse. Like a sculpture, he wouldn't be able to think for thousands of years and could only float in the air in a muddle-headed manner. But even Luo Fan, who had a firm and unshakable Taoist heart, felt that his spirit and mind were under an extremely strong pressure after coming here. He even felt that his thinking was greatly suppressed, and the speed of thinking and the degree of perfection were affected. Although he felt so uncomfortable, Luo Fan was quite happy. Because when he came to the bottom of the pit, he had already seen clearly the thing that caused the pit. It was a star that looked like a blue crystal. A star that was 100 miles in size was completely condensed by the star essence Qi. It was a perfect sphere, like a shining gem, and was lying quietly at the bottom of the pit. But the bottom of the pit was not something like a stratum. Instead, it was like a pitch-black sea of fire. This sea of fire surrounded the star, and the jet-black flame licked the blue ball, as if it was burning the star. This kind of jet-black flame was the earth core evil fire that only existed in the underground. This kind of flame had an extremely high temperature, and its heat was extremely restrained. There was not even a trace of heat that could be emitted. The 100-kilometer-wide star did not show any signs of being damaged by the flames. Instead, it became more and more round, as if it was a creature cultivating with the help of the flames. Although Luo Fan's thoughts were slightly affected by the strong pressure, he could see that the evil core fire below was not ordinary. The flames that covered a radius of 1,000 miles appeared at the bottom of the crater, but the temperature of the entire crater didn't increase at all. Instead, it became colder and colder. This was enough to show how the heat of the flames was restrained and how miraculous it was. Under the burning of the flames, the star did not seem to be damaged. Instead, it became even more round, which showed how extraordinary the star was. With a thought, Luo Fan landed on the star. The moment he set foot on the star, he felt as if there were countless strange ripples flashing in the depths of his soul. These strange ripples seemed to be meaningless, as if they were just a product of the irregular activity of his soul. However, Luo Fan felt a power constantly urging him to do certain things, to calm the ripples. This should be it. The strange ripples made Luo Fan understand in the blink of an eye that the star below must be the thing that had attracted him here. The moment he came into contact with the star, a power that suppressed his soul and mind directly poured into his body through his feet. It flowed along his meridians and enveloped his entire body. Along with this pressure, an indescribable sense of quietus suddenly filled his entire soul, mind, and consciousness. Under this sense of death, Luo Fan felt a peace he had never felt before. Although his thoughts were stagnant, it seemed that his entire soul was being cleansed like never before. The various impurities in his mind were quickly disappearing, and his soul was becoming more and more resilient. It seemed that his entire mind and soul were becoming clearer and purer because of the cleansing of the sense of death. This thing is really extraordinary. Just this cleansing ability alone would make it a rare cultivation treasure if it was refined slightly. Such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. The star had a strong suppressive effect on thoughts. If one cultivated next to it, the speed at which one's thoughts operated and mind would be greatly affected. However, cultivation required one to have no distracting thoughts, so the suppression did not have much of an impact on cultivation. On the contrary, its ability to cleanse one's mind, soul, and mind was even more beneficial to one's cultivation. However, this alone is not enough to lure me here from tens of billions of miles away. Such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. With a thought, his body floated up and left the surface of the star. As he left, the power lost its outlet, and its influence on Luo Fan instantly weakened by hundreds of times. I didn't expect it to be a month already. Luo Fan suddenly felt that something was wrong. He pinched his fingers and calculated. Only then did he realize that he seemed to have only stood on the star for a few thoughts. Only a short while had passed, but in reality, a month had passed. He did not know whether to be sad or happy. This thing is really beneficial to the mind and soul, but the side effects of such stagnant thoughts are really fatal. If I don't have the ability to change time, I'm afraid I can't use this thing at all. He took a step forward and arrived above the flame in the blink of an eye. His eyes flashed with gold and silver light, and he found that the earth core fiend fire was 1,000 miles thick, and the area it covered was tens of thousands of miles. Furthermore, there was a powerful geomagnetic true power within it. It was this geomagnetic true power that repelled the essence of the star, causing the star to be unable to continue descending. Instead, it endured the burning and refinement of the earth core fiend fire. With a light step, he had already stepped into the earth core fiend fire. In an instant, he felt that the temperature around him had risen by tens of thousands of degrees. At the same time, there were threads of evil aura that wanted to surge out from the flames and seep into his body. At this moment, a dark green light flashed across the surface of his body, directly isolating the heat and evil aura. The star pearl robe had been able to protect him even when he had entered the explosive environment of the extreme of the world, much less now, when he was only facing a type of earth core fiend fire. There's nothing special about it. It seems that the thing that has attracted me here is not this earth core fiend fire, he thought to himself. Making up his mind, he covered it with his left hand and opened his sleeve. He had already absorbed the star with a diameter of 100 miles into his universe in the sleeve. Although the sphere with a diameter of 100 miles was large, Luo Fan's universe in the sleeve had already been refined by Luo Fan multiple times. At this time, it was already vast and boundless. It was very easy for it to contain an existence of this size. When the star entered the universe in the sleeve, the ripples that had continuously appeared from the depths of Luo Fan's spirit instantly disappeared. This caused Luo Fan to completely believe that the star was indeed the thing that had attracted him. Since he had obtained the thing that had attracted him, Luo Fan turned and was about to leave. Suddenly, his mind stirred. He lifted his hand and flipped it over. In the blink of an eye, an extremely mysterious and powerful suction force appeared in the palm of his right hand. This suction force was specifically targeted at the Earth core fiend fire and the geomagnetic true power below. Under the effect of this suction force, endless Earth core fiend fire and geomagnetic true power madly gathered towards the center of his palm. They continuously piled up and continuously compressed. After a short while, a ball the size of a head had been compressed into the center of his palm. The sphere was transparent and crystalline in color, but there was a pitch-black sea of flames within it. In the depths of the sea of flames, there was a multicolored light swimming in it like a flood dragon at the bottom of the sea. This ball was the manifestation of Luo Fan's mysterious suction force. And that sea of fire was naturally the Earth core fiend fire. The dragon that shone with a six-colored light from the eaves was the geomagnetic true power that could stop a star from falling from the 9 heavens. At this time, an extremely thick and turbid energy descended from the sky like a waterfall, pouring towards Luo Fan. Luo Fan's heart moved. He already knew what was going on. This must be because the star's departure had caused the mysterious power left in the sinkhole to disappear, causing the power that was restricting the flow of the Yellow Springs water to disappear. That was why the water of the Yellow Springs water was pouring down. With a thought, he sent the ball in his hand into the universe in the sleeve. His body turned, and he turned into a deep blue rainbow that shot upwards. He easily bypassed the Yellow Springs water that was pouring down from above, and in a short while, he was out of the sky pit. Above the sky pit, he condensed his figure and looked down. He saw muddy yellow spring water pouring out from a certain part of the cave wall, like sewage being discharged from a pipe. A light breeze blew past. A small whirlpool suddenly appeared around the sky pit. Endless energy, demonic energy, and other types of energy continuously gathered towards the sky pit. They quickly merged with the Yellow Springs water that was pouring out, creating a mysterious change that gradually changed the nature of the Yellow Springs water, turning it into a colorless and transparent spring water that possessed a strange nature. After a long while, the spring water had already reached half the depth of the sky pit, and was 4,900 miles from the ground. The Yellow Springs water that was flowing out was completely sealed by the transparent water, and could no longer pour down. In the blink of an eye, the sky pit below had turned into an extremely strange deep well. After the spring water stopped rising, the strange transparent spring water started to evaporate and accumulate in the sky. Gradually, it filled up the entire sky pit, and turned it into a scene of white fog. This white fog was not ordinary white fog, but contained a very special spirituality. It was extremely condensed, and constantly formed all kinds of strange things above the sky pit. Like a dragon, like a tiger, like a cloud, like a mountain, nature's creation is indeed incredible. Luo Fan looked at this scene and could not help but sigh in admiration. Chapter 268. From the outer realm, magic clouds formed formation. Luo Fan merely raised his hand and waved. A cloud of mist condensed into an illusory tiger that was at least 100 feet in size. It broke away from the main cloud of mist in the sinkhole and flew directly in front of him. After this cloud of mist arrived in front of him, it began to struggle violently like a real tiger. It quickly twisted and collapsed, as if it wanted to perish together with Luo Fan. It also seemed as if it could no longer maintain this form and was about to collapse. Luo Fan was very interested. He raised his hand and grabbed at the air. This cloud of mist, that was 100 feet in size, compressed into a white ball the size of a fist in front of him. The great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes flashed in his eyes. He had already seen all the origins of this white ball. He clearly understood it, and also understood the mysteries of its structure. I see. This thought flashed in Luo Fan's mind. He exerted a little force in his hand and the small ball suddenly collapsed, turning into a large cloud of mist. It constantly twisted and changed its shape. Soon, it condensed into the shape of an incomparably mysterious Buzhou mountain. This Buzhou mountain was vivid and lifelike. Even the vast and unyielding aura that was constantly emitted from Buzhou mountain could be found on it. He exerted another force, and this Buzhou mountain suddenly collapsed. As it twisted and changed, it turned into a 9-headed lion. Then, all kinds of strange life forms appeared. After a short while, he had completely verified his understanding of this cloud of mist. Satisfied, he raised his hand and pressed down slightly. This large cloud of mist suddenly fell. After a while, it returned to the sinkhole and intertwined with the constantly changing cloud of mist, becoming inseparable. This cloud of mist was formed by the strange spring water of the yellow spring below. It had a strange binding power that could lock all the innate qi that it came into contact with around it. Then, through some mysterious change, it gave birth to a strange life force. Because of this, such a strange scene was formed. Understanding the reason why this cloud of mist could form such a strange scene, Luo Fan seemed to have understood something. He felt that his understanding of innate qi had deepened by another level. As for the cloud itself, it was not something that he, who was rich and overbearing, cared about. With a thought, boundless innate origin energy gathered around his body. In the blink of an eye, it gathered into a white cloud that was about 10 acres in size under his feet. This cloud was tough and soft. But what was different from him was that the edge of this cloud was constantly compressing, twisting, and changing. When it finally stabilized, it had already formed the shapes of countless goddesses, dragons, tigers, and heavenly flowers. They were vivid and lifelike. Apart from being white in color, it was as if there really were goddesses, dragons, tigers, and heavenly flowers gathering around him, surrounding him. This was the secret that Luo Fan comprehended from the cloud of mist below. At this moment, these images that formed around the cloud were not controlled by him. With Luo Fan's ability, it was extremely easy for him to control the cloud to form these images. As a matter of fact, these images were the natural changes that occurred after the cloud came into contact with the surrounding innate qi of vitality. The entire process of transformation was innate, a natural evolution of the great Tao of heaven and earth. But it did not need to consume any of Luo Fan's energy. In fact, when it was formed, Luo Fan did not even know what form it would take, or what kind of strange transformation it would undergo. If I can refine this technique, I can definitely turn it into a mystifying, invisible, and flying divine ability. Such a thought flashed in Luo Fan's mind. With a light wave of his hand, the cloud, which was 10 acres in size and was surrounded by countless dragons, tigers, goddesses, and heavenly flowers, rose rapidly. In just a short while, it had already risen to an altitude of 90,000 kilometers, leaning against the astral wind, lightning, and fire layer above. With the illusory and real door in his dantian, no matter where he was, it did not make much difference to Luo Fan. Therefore, he did not need to care about his position or the surrounding environment. At this moment, he casually chose this ordinary spot to cultivate. After sitting cross-legged on the platform where the cloud was born, he gave a slight thought, and this strange cloud began to display all kinds of mysterious changes. In an instant, the goddesses, dragons, tigers, and heavenly flowers that formed around the cloud completely collapsed. After the various images collapsed, the cloud turned slightly and condensed, turning into countless tiny and erratic three-dimensional talismans that contained endless mysteries. These three-dimensional talismans slowly rotated above the cloud, gradually intertwining with each other, forming an extremely profound and complete entity. After this entity was formed, it quickly absorbed the endless energy between heaven and earth, constantly strengthening the entity, and even formed a vortex around it. This vortex grew larger and larger. It became more and more obvious. When the vortex had already expanded to a radius of several hundred miles, and was about to become a hurricane, all the changes suddenly disappeared. The cloud that Luo Fan was on instantly hid in the void, and could no longer be seen. The void became clear. What was shocking was that the clouds had formed an extremely complete and powerful great formation. This method was exactly what Luo Fan was thinking about. It was a method to use the innate vitality gathered by the cloud to transform it into various forms. Although he did not know what kind of changes the innate vitality would undergo in the process of combining with the cloud, and why it would form such images of dragons, tigers, goddesses, and heavenly flowers, he could easily understand how to change the structure of the cloud according to the image. However, he was able to easily understand how to change the structure of the auspicious cloud based on its image. He was able to make it condense into complicated and profound talismans and form a large formation within the great formation formed by the cloud. The 10-acre cloud had already turned into a boundless void. Looking up, down, left, right, front, back, and forth, one could not see the edge or the end of it. This great formation was extremely mysterious. In terms of defense and concealment ability, it was only average, but it possessed the strongest power that any innate god could only dream of. This was because it could change the speed of the flow of time inside. At this moment, in this great formation, the speed of the flow of time was more than 100 times faster than in the primordial world. In other words, 100 years in this great formation was equivalent to a year in the primordial world. As for why there was such a boundless void here, it was because the great formation contained some secrets of the illusory Tao, but it was not difficult to understand with a thought. Luo Fan had already scanned the spacetime inside the entire great formation. The omnipotent feeling let him know that the great formation was already working normally, but he completely calmed down. He raised his hand and from the universe in his sleeve, a star that was 100 miles in size appeared in the void in front of him. The secrets of the illusory realm were extremely mysterious. Although this great formation only contained a space of 10 acres, after constructing such an illusory world, it could also accommodate objects that were far more than 10 acres in size. This star with a diameter of 100 miles in this place did not cause any impact to the formation at all. As for this star, Luo Fan had already roughly studied it when he collected it. At that time, he knew that the material of this star was a good material to refine Dharma artifacts that assisted cultivation. However, this material alone was not enough to summon Luo Fan from tens of billions of miles away. After thinking about all these situations, he knew that this star should have a universe inside it. Just as this star appeared, there was a mysterious fluctuation in the depths of Luo Fan's divine soul. This fluctuation was constantly urging him to do something that he didn't even know yet. He forcefully suppressed this fluctuation. Luo Fan activated his great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes to the extreme, and his eyes even shot out gold and silver rays of light. This light directly pierced into the interior of the star before him. It was a pity that this star actually contained a strange power. The golden eyes of the great sun and the silver eyes of the bright moon were able to distort time and space, see through all appearances, illuminate the source of all things, and even trace back to the source and see the past of everything they saw. However, in front of this seemingly mysterious star, they were obstructed. No matter how hard he tried, he could only see through 20 miles of this star. No matter how he changed the angle, there was still an area with a diameter of nearly 20 miles that he could not see. Could it be that this thing is not from the untainted world? Instead, it is from the outer world. After trying for a long time, Luo Fan's heart shook, and suddenly such a thought came to him. The great sun golden eyes and bright moon silver eyes were the products of cultivating the left and right parts of the Pangu chaotic heavenly eyes to the first level. Their power was quite extraordinary, and in this untainted world, they were almost invincible and could exert power that surpassed almost everything. It also seemed that there was nothing that they could not see through, and nothing could stop them from guessing and observing. This star was something that his eyes couldn't see through. From the looks of it, it seemed to be something that came from the outer realms. If it really is from the outer world, then it is extremely rare. Thinking that this might be an item from the outer world, Luo Fan's Taoist heart was slightly shaken. Even on Earth, meteorites from the outer world were already very rare and were sought after by countless scientists. Moreover, this untainted world had a defense that was hundreds of millions of times stronger than that of Earth. The thing that could break through the defense and enter the untainted world was probably hundreds of millions of times more precious than the meteorites from the outer world. This existence was quite tempting even to Luo Fan. Thinking of this, he could not help but think. With a thought, the earthly immortal Tao fruit exploded with a bang, turning into 1,036,800 three-dimensional talismans shaped like Mount Buzhou. They rushed out of all the acupoints in his body and turned into a huge formation in the shape of a strange fruit in front of him. This was the mysterious Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array. However, compared to before, this array was at least 100 times larger and more complicated. Although it was still not comparable to the star in front of him with a diameter of 50 miles, it was still quite shocking. After the array was formed, it suddenly surged violently. Then, an extremely strange door split open like a huge mouth, and it directly swallowed the star that was hundreds and thousands of times larger than the array. Chapter 269. Connate Indestructible, World Embryo. The mysterious earthly immortal heavenly escape formation began to operate rapidly. Endless complicated words and patterns flowed quickly in the array like a waterfall. Countless kinds of indescribable probing powers surged in it. They peeked at the star that had shrunk countless times inside, probed, and used various methods to deduce the mysteries of the star. Luo Fan fused his mind and will with the array. As the array operated, the fog on the surface of the star was gradually unraveled, and he gradually approached the essence of the star. The entire process of the array's operation was extremely boring. However, Luo Fan enjoyed it. The Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array was an array that was constructed using the image of the Earth Immortal Tao fruit. The array could continuously improve as Luo Fan's cultivation realm increased. It could be said to be an array with no limit. Compared to the last time he used the array, Luo Fan's cultivation realm had increased by an unknown amount. Even the Dharma power units in the Earth Immortal Tao fruit had increased by more than double. The power of the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array had increased by countless times. When it was activated, its deduction ability was much stronger than before. The consumption was much less than before. However, the mysteries contained in the star were too profound and obscure. Although the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array had such unbelievable power, it was difficult to deduce its mysteries in a short period of time. Time gradually passed. Even though the grand formation outside sped up time, however, when the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array was activated to the extreme and the mysteries contained in the star were gradually deduced, 100 years had passed in the primordial world. If he counted it, Luo Fan had been operating the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape Array for 10,000 years in the array. If it were not for the endless primordial energy that was constantly transmitted from the top of Mount Buzhou through the illusory door, the operation of the grand formation over the past 10,000 years would have been enough to drain Luo Fan dry. Even his physical body and divine soul would not have been able to escape. However, even with the endless chaotic energy being injected by the door, Luo Fan still felt that his Dharma power units had been completely emptied after 10,000 years. Every Dharma power unit was empty, as if it was only an empty shell. There wasn't even a shred of energy within it. It was even to the extent that the diagrams formed from the various divine abilities and techniques on the Tao fruit's grand Tao scripture had become lifeless, and they didn't glow or have the slightest vitality. If it were not for the fact that these strange diagrams were not supported by power but cultivation realm, they would have collapsed long ago and turned into power that was consumed by the array. Although there was such an intense consumption, Luo Fan's face didn't have the slightest trace of worry. Instead, it was filled with a look of ecstasy. His entire mind was rippling with an indescribable joy and satisfaction. Compared to his gains, the price of exhausting all his energy was not even worth mentioning, because through these 10,000 years of deduction, the earthly immortal heaven-escape formation that had improved greatly in might had already deduced the profundities contained within the formation of this star. This star was not from the outside world, at least, most of it was not. This star was something from outside the primordial world. After going through some inconceivable and mysterious changes, it coincidentally broke through the barrier of the primordial world. In the process of passing through the endless starry sky, it absorbed the endless essence of the stars and condensed into a star with a diameter of 30,000 miles. With incomparably fast speed and great power, it broke through the barrier between the endless starry sky and the primordial world, directly charging into the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. The layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire contained boundless astral wind, lightning, and fire. Under the friction, the huge star rapidly shrank. When it charged through the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire, it had already shrunk to the size of 10,000 miles. It was several times purer than when it was first formed. Afterwards, the star charged into the ground with all sorts of strange and unfathomable power, directly evaporating the ground. In the end, it went 10,000 miles underground. It was fixed in place by the wave of geomagnetic true power and endured the burning of the fiendish fire. The sinkhole was formed during this process. Nearly 200,000 years had passed since it had landed on the fiendish fire. The fiendish fire had continuously refined and condensed the star during these 200,000 years, causing it to slowly shrink. When Luo Fan obtained the star, it had already shrunk from its original diameter of 10,000 miles to its current diameter of 50 miles. If one were to calculate it seriously, the star was more than 1,000 times purer than when it had passed through the endless starry sky and entered the layer of astral wind, lightning, and fire. It could be said that merely the star energy condensed by this star could be considered to be an extremely precious existence, yet it was already worth Luo Fan traveling a few tens of billions of kilometers for it. Aside from this, the even more precious thing in the star was the core of the star, the item that had come from outside the chaos wasteland. Even until now, Luo Fan did not understand what kind of existence the chaos wasteland was, nor could he understand it. However, he knew that the world outside the chaotic wasteland was mysterious and unfathomable. No matter how impossible it was still possible for it to happen. No matter how impossible it was still possible for it to exist. No matter how impossible it was still possible for it to appear. The item that had come from outside the chaos wasteland was something that could not possibly appear, yet had truly appeared. It was a natural, inextinguishable spirit light. A natural, inextinguishable spirit light that was different from the natural, inextinguishable spirit light that Luo Fan had seen, or that he knew of. This spirit light not only had all kinds of characteristics that the natural, inextinguishable spirit light should have in Luo Fan's understanding, but it also had an incredible power, which was that it was born with a world embryo. A world embryo that was equal to the Chaos Wasteland, and if it grew up, it would be at the same level as the Chaos Wasteland. As long as he had this embryo, Luo Fan would have a real possibility of surpassing Pangu. It could be said that with this natural, inextinguishable spirit light, Luo Fan's grand dream of surpassing Pangu, the Chaos Wasteland, and the space-time was no longer a dream, and it was no longer an unreachable dream with almost no hope of success. I see. No wonder my divine soul would have such a wave, no wonder I could sense it from tens of billions of miles away. It turns out that this thing is so important to me. Heaven is really on my side, heaven is on my side. Luo Fan could not bear the shock of his Taoist heart. His heart was filled with a kind of infinite joy, and he laughed. Compared with this natural, inextinguishable spirit light, The star essence that was condensed was almost like garbage, not worth mentioning. After a long time, Luo Fan calmed his mind and stopped the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape formation. With a thought, the Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape formation directly spat out the star that was 100 miles in diameter from the formation, and this incomparably huge star once again floated in front of him. Then, he raised his hand and pointed. The Earth Immortal Heavenly Escape formation, which had become dim, suddenly collapsed, and turned into a magical power that drilled into all the acupoints in his body, and regathered in his dantian, forming an Earth Immortal Tao fruit that seemed illusory yet real. He blinked his eyes and looked at the star with a slightly fanatical gaze. After a long time, he covered the star with his left hand and put it back into his universe in the sleeve. At this moment, his body was so empty that it could hardly be cleaned up. Naturally, it was not a good time to deal with this star and take out the natural inextinguishable spirit light. After putting it back into the universe in the sleeve, he closed his eyes again and tried his best to expand the illusory door in his dantian. At the same time, the Earth Immortal Tao fruit produced an incomparably terrifying suction, and through this door, it madly extracted the endless liquid chaotic yuan qi on the top of Buzhou Mountain. Hundreds of liquid dragons rushed out of the door and went straight into the Earth Immortal Tao fruit that seemed illusory yet real. Ever since the number of magical power units in the Earth Immortal Tao fruit exceeded 1 million, the energy in Luo Fan had never been full. At this time, the desire of the magical power units for energy had reached the extreme. These injections of energy, however, were all devoured into the magical power unit. They constantly replenished the emptiness inside the magical power units, so that the countless strange patterns inside the magical power units gradually glowed. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, another 10,000 years had passed in the array. To the primordial world, another 100 years had passed. On this day, Luo Fan's heart suddenly skipped a beat, and a sense of fulfillment surged in his heart. With a thought, he realized that the magical power units in his body had been replenished. The Earth Immortal Tao fruit became more and more mysterious. The magical power units shone brightly, and all kinds of strange mysterious lights shone. The strange patterns formed by the mystical abilities in the Tao fruit Tao scripture became even more lively and contained infinite vitality. He opened his eyes that had been closed for 10,000 years. A deep and distant golden and silver light flashed in the depths of his pupils. A feeling of omnipotence surfaced in his heart. He raised his hand and drew a line. An extremely mysterious trajectory that seemed to contain the endless great Tao of heaven and earth was left in midair. With the appearance of this trajectory, the array that enveloped him underwent a strange change. The speed of time in the array doubled again, reaching more than 20 times that of the primordial world. At the same time, a mysterious energy was gradually being produced in the entire formation. It seemed to be natural vital energy, chaotic vital energy, stellar vital energy, and baleful qi. It was truly profound and indescribably wonderful. Chapter 270. 3 months of cultivation. This was how Luo Fan had improved the power of the formation with a wave of his hand. Although he was at the same level before and after he absorbed the energy, but the feeling of being full of energy and the feeling of being empty inside were two completely different feelings. The power he displayed was also as different as heaven and earth. If he was full of energy, he would have enough experience to display all the improvements after the improvement of the magical power unit. But if his body was empty, his mind and will would be covered by that emptiness. He would not be able to properly study the improvement of his cultivation, and naturally he would not be able to display the improvement of his cultivation. After improving the Grand Array, Luo Fan took a deep breath of the strange qi in the Grand Array. He sensed the qi circulating several times in his meridians and directly entering the Earth Immortal Tao fruit, turning it into the purest energy. His mind gradually became tranquil like an ancient well. Even though it was only a small movement like this, he had already completely grasped the might he possessed after his cultivation had increased. He raised his hand and slightly waved. Immediately, a 50-kilometer-wide star flashing with blue light rushed out of his sleeve and floated in front of him in a shocking manner. After the appearance of the star, a strange pressure instantly spread out from the star, instantly spreading tens of thousands of miles around, suppressing the souls and minds of all living beings within it, that is, Luo Fan's soul and mind. Luo Fan used the mysterious earthly immortal escape formation to spend 10,000 years to deduce the mysteries of this star. He had already completely grasped every detail of this star, no matter how small. At this moment, with a thought, an invisible force directly cut into a special point on the surface of the star. This point was one of the connecting nodes of the star. Using some special method, one could easily break through the defense of the star. As long as he attacked the right spot, this invisible force was like a knife cutting through tofu, directly penetrating into the body of the star. In the blink of an eye, it had penetrated 40 kilometers into the star, arriving at a depth that he couldn't see through no matter how hard he tried. His mind turned slightly. This invisible force suddenly collapsed, and slightly rotated around a very complicated trajectory. With a soft swish, this invisible force had already rotated around the star into a perfect sphere, a three-dimensional sphere that directly wrapped around the entire surface of the star. As this invisible force rotated, countless tiny cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of the star, cutting the surface of the star into countless tiny fragments. Seeing this, Luo Fan raised his hand and waved gently. The countless tiny fragments of the stars had all left the surface of the planet in a wave, turning into countless arc-bottomed obelisks of different sizes that were tens of miles high. After these cubic alls with arc-bottomed cubic alls left, they combined together like transformers, turning into a hollow star with a diameter of 100 miles. What remained of the star was a glossy blue sphere with a diameter of 20 kilometers. It was a ball with a diameter of 20 kilometers, and there was a hint of grayness within its surface. The two spheres floated in front of Luo Fan. The former exuded a strange pressure, while the latter exuded an extremely rich star essence and a strange chaotic aura. Luo Fan had long known that the remaining object was formed from the combination of the innate inextinguishable spiritual light and the star essence. What he had separated was a pure and condensed star essence. With just a raise of his hand, he had already put the hollow star, which was composed of countless cubic alls with arc-bottomed cubic alls, into his sleeve. As the star in the sky was put away, the powerful pressure on the soul and mind that had existed since the star appeared completely disappeared in the blink of an eye. Obviously, that strange pressure was brought about by the essence of the stars that had been tainted by the innate eternal spiritual light from the outerium. After putting away the hollow star, Luo Fan gently waved his hand again, and the blue sphere with a hint of gray light arrived in front of him. Through the tens of thousands of years of deduction, Luo Fan had long since understood the mysteries of the star's structure. At this moment, there was no need for any hesitation. He raised his hand and pressed down, and a gray Tao fire spewed out from his palm. At first, the Tao fire was only like a candle, but it burned more and more brightly. After a few breaths, it had completely enveloped the sphere with a diameter of 20 miles in front of him. Under the burning of this mysterious Tao fire, the sphere with a diameter of 20 miles was like a huge gray fireball. Although the Tao fire could only use chaotic vital qi as fuel, the star essence qi and other kinds of vital qi within the formation he controlled could also be turned into fuel after a complicated transformation. Thus, as the sphere was burned, the Tao fire burned more and more vigorously, and its effects became stronger and stronger. It was as if countless firewood was constantly being added to the fire. It was like countless fuel. As the Tao fire burned, the sphere with a diameter of 20 miles in front of him gradually melted. That wisp of gray light gradually retracted, and the entire surface of the sphere was wrapped in a blue liquid. As the blue liquid flowed around the surface of the star, it was continuously injected into the Tao fire. Then, through the complicated effects of the formation that Luo Fan had set up, it was turned into fuel for the Tao fire. Time passed minute by minute. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. After 3 months of refinement, the sphere had shrunk to a diameter of 10 feet. Its surface was wrapped in an extremely tough layer of star essence, and there was a small gray ball that was slowly rotating inside. The gray light emitted from the inside of the sphere was extremely mysterious. As the light circulated, it seemed to contain everything in the world, but it also seemed to be pure and unadulterated. At this moment, the process of refining the star had reached the final stage. This layer of incomparably tough star essence chi was where the essence of the entire star lay. Although it was only a thin, paper-like layer, it was even tougher and more difficult to break than the previous layer of star essence that was dozens of miles thick. Luo Fan's mind was calm, and his expression was cold. The gray Tao fire condensed and compressed, turning into a thick fog that enveloped the sphere with a diameter of 10 feet. As it burned, the layer of paper-like star essence on the surface of the sphere slowly flowed at a speed that was almost invisible to the naked eye. This situation had been going on for half a month. Compared to half a month ago, the only difference was that the star essence was flowing at a slightly faster speed. Although the change was very small, Luo Fan did not feel the slightest bit impatient. To him, he had spent the previous 20,000 years, so why should he care about these few months? Therefore, at this moment, he only controlled the Tao fire to continuously burn the sphere in front of him. He did not care about anything else. When the 3 months were up, a strange sound suddenly appeared on the surface of the sphere. There was a cracking sound. It was like the sound of the world collapsing, and it directly echoed in Luo Fan's mind. Then, a small, almost undetectable crack appeared on the layer of star essence on the surface of the sphere. This small crack quickly spread and quickly split. In the blink of an eye, it had turned into a spider web that completely covered the surface of the sphere. Then, a gray brilliance rushed out from the inside of the sphere. This gray brilliance seemed to contain all things in the world, but it also seemed to be pure and contained all the mysteries of heaven and earth. After this light burst out, the interior of the sphere produced an indescribable suction force. Following this suction force, the cracked star essence collapsed with a loud bang, turning into countless extremely small fragments that were directly sucked into the center along with the surrounding burning Tao fire. There was a soft sound. The void in front of Luo Fan became clear. The Tao fire, the star essence, and the strange vitality all disappeared. All that was left was an irregularly shaped ball of light that was the size of a human head. It was emanating a mysterious gray light, and it was floating in the air. This spiritual light seemed to contain all things in the world, but it also seemed to contain nothing. It was just an extremely pure object. An inextinguishable aura was emitted from this spiritual light. Connate inextinguishable spiritual light. It really is the connate inextinguishable spiritual light. Although Luo Fan had long deduced the existence of this object, and even deduced the characteristics of this object that the connate inextinguishable spiritual light in the untainted world did not have, he still felt an indescribable excitement in his mind when he saw this object. Buzz, at this moment, a sound that seemed to directly hit the soul suddenly reverberated in his sea of consciousness. As this strange sound reverberated, Luo Fan only felt his mind clear up, and the irrepressible excitement and ecstasy instantly disappeared. It is indeed extraordinary. It seems that this object is really fated with me. Luo Fan's mind moved, and he already knew what was going on. He could not help but think with some pride. With that thought in mind, he didn't dare to be negligent. With a thought, the earthly immortal's Tao fruit in his dantian exploded with a bang and transformed into a magical power that circled around the meridians in his body. With another rush, It suddenly rushed out from all the apertures in his body and instantly wrapped around the spiritual light that was the size of a head before him. As the magical power wrapped around it, a very strange feeling surged in his mind. Suddenly, he seemed to feel that his magical power wrapped around an extremely heavy world. When he exerted force, it did not move at all. He could not move this spiritual light at all. Knowing that it was not that easy to subdue this connate inextinguishable spiritual light, Luo Fan was not surprised, and he let out a soft cry. A mysterious and indescribable mantra flowed through his mind and consciousness. At this moment, his body also produced an indescribable change, as if it had changed into an inconceivable great Tao, and his whole body emitted a vast and unyielding mysterious aura. As he changed. Chapter 271. Undamaged in the postnatal realm and immortal. This Dharma power was like the Milky Way. It swam a few times in Luo Fan's sea of consciousness. After sweeping through the entire sea of consciousness, it rushed straight into the towering Buzhou mountain and lingered for a long time before rushing out. However, that ball of spiritual light had already been left in the depths of his soul and was suppressed at the foot of the Buzhou mountain. After this magical power left the Buzhou mountain that was transformed from the divine soul, it circled around his sea of consciousness a few times before directly drilling into a mysterious and unfathomable place. In the blink of an eye, it had already disappeared from his sea of consciousness and returned to his dantian, transforming into a mysterious earthly immortal's Tao fruit that contained infinite power and seemed illusory yet real. At this moment, Luo Fan calmed his mind and calmed down the mantra that was pouring down like a waterfall in his mind. The moment his mantra completely calmed down, an incomparably stable, safe, and powerful feeling emerged from the depths of his soul where the ball of spiritual light was. In an instant, this feeling spread to his entire soul, then to his entire sea of consciousness, and then to his entire body. As expected. Luo Fan was overjoyed and could not help but murmur to himself. This incomparably mysterious and irregular ball of spiritual light was the connate inextinguishable spiritual light that came from the outer realm. Because this spiritual light came from the outer realm, it broke through the barrier of the untainted world and entered the untainted world due to some incredible change. Therefore, this connate inextinguishable spiritual light was innately incompatible with the untainted world. Wherever it was a self-contained existence that was completely independent of the untainted world. The mantra that flowed through Luo Fan's mind was not something else. It was a mantra that simulated his aura to be the aura of Pangu. For Luo Fan, who had comprehended his own Tao fruit from the spine of Pangu on Buzhou mountain, it might be impossible to become Pangu, but it was extremely easy to simulate his aura. After all, the aura emitted from Pangu's spine was Pangu's aura. Pangu existed before the untainted world. Compared to the objects outside the untainted world, its attraction was far stronger than that of the untainted world. Therefore, after sensing the Pangu power released from Luo Fan, the inextinguishable spirit light was directly attracted to Luo Fan, then merged into Luo Fan's body along with that strand of power of Luo Fan's. At last, the inextinguishable spirit light filled up Luo Fan's spiritual world and soul. And what was even more mysterious was that because Luo Fan was the only existence that attracted it in the untainted world. In just an instant, the connate inextinguishable spiritual light completely fused with his soul and became a part of it. It could be said that in just an instant, the connate inextinguishable spiritual light, which contained endless mysteries and the embryo of a world, was refined by Luo Fan. In this way, although Luo Fan had lost the possibility of turning the connate inextinguishable spiritual light into a connate spiritual treasure, his soul had obtained the characteristics of immortality. How could Luo Fan not be happy with such an amazing opportunity? After a long time, Luo Fan gradually calmed down. With a thought, he merged his consciousness into his soul again and observed the world from the perspective of his soul. Suddenly, he seemed to feel that there was a very mysterious but very obscure existence in his soul. He knew that it must have been brought about by the connate inextinguishable spiritual light. He controlled his consciousness to sweep his divine soul thousands of times, but he only found that, except for a head-sized divine soul that had turned gray in the depths of his divine soul at the foot of Mount Bujo, there was no other abnormality. The connate inextinguishable spiritual light and the embryo of the world were nowhere to be found. So, refining the connate inextinguishable spiritual light is like this. It's really mysterious. Luo Fan sighed after a long time. At the same time, he also understood why he felt as if there was something extra in his soul. He also understood why, after refining the connate inextinguishable spiritual light, he would become an immortal that could only be suppressed and could not be destroyed. The reason why he felt as if there was something extra in his soul was because the connate inextinguishable spiritual light had already fused with his soul. The embryo of the world was naturally hidden somewhere in the depths of his soul. He could not sense where it was, but that was because his cultivation level was not enough to sense the embryo of the world. After the innate inextinguishable spirit light was refined, it completely fused with his soul. Because of this, his soul and the innate inextinguishable spirit light became one and two, which was why he was able to remain unharmed. Understanding this, Luo Fan knew that according to his current cultivation level, it was basically impossible to sense the embryo of the world and understand the mystery of the connate inextinguishable spiritual light. Therefore, he made a prompt decision to withdraw his consciousness. With a thought, the entire formation that had enveloped him for 200 years suddenly collapsed. The void around him quickly became blurry. Not long after, it turned into an ever-changing auspicious cloud that condensed all kinds of dragons, tigers, heavenly ladies, and heavenly flowers. Looking around, a feeling that he could go anywhere in the world surged in his heart. Although the hard work of these 200 years did not improve his cultivation level much, and did not let him find anything that could completely avert the great calamity. However, at this moment, Luo Fan was not worried about the great calamity that would happen tens of thousands of years later. He was full of confidence. After refining the connate inextinguishable spiritual light, Luo Fan already had the ability to be unharmed. Even if he could not survive the great calamity, even if the entire untainted world was occupied by the extraterrestrial demons, to him, no matter how bad the situation was, he could still survive. The only difference was that the environment had changed. This could be said to have completely eliminated all of his worries. In this way, what else did he need to worry about? With a thought, the strange auspicious cloud that he was sitting on suddenly collapsed, turning into a wave of connate vitality and dissipating in the void. Then, his body shook and turned into a dark cyan rainbow, directly rushing towards the northwest of Bujo Mountain, only leaving an afterimage that was tens of thousands of feet long in the air. At this moment, it had been 200 years since he left Bujo Mountain. In this short period of time, in the spirit kiliacosm inside the Wuji Palace, it had been 140,000 years, which was more than a yuan hui. Even if Luo Fu, who was ordered to cultivate in seclusion for yuan hui, should have come out long ago, not to mention Luo Chunyang, who only needed a little time to cultivate. At this time, Luo Chunyang might have already traveled in the spirit kiliacosm for tens of thousands of years, and he might even have many children. Under such circumstances, how could he not hurry to the spirit kiliacosm? If Luo Fan wanted to speed up regardless of everything, he could directly open a virtual door here and directly connect to Bujo Mountain. However, crossing this distance of nearly 100 billion miles would consume at least 30% of his spiritual power, which would take many years to replenish. The cost-performance ratio was too low, and it was not worth it. On this day, Luo Fan came to a position 70 billion miles away from Bujo Mountain. Suddenly, he felt an extremely strong evil spirit rushing up from the ground. Even though he was 90,000 kilometers up in the sky, the streak of light that he had transformed into was slightly disrupted by the powerful baleful aura. Luo Fan was shocked. The dark cyan rainbow condensed, and he had already condensed his body again, directly floating in the void above the source of the evil spirit. Lowering his head to take a look, he closed the distance of 90,000 kilometers and saw a mountain range with a radius of 10,000 kilometers below him. The place where the evil spirit rushed out was in the middle of the mountain range, at the mouth of a mountain peak that was shaped like a volcano. Such a powerful evil spirit can only be refined by killing at least 100 billion living beings. How could it be like this? Could it be that there are 100 billion living beings in this untainted land now? Luo Fan was shocked. This evil spirit contained a faint smell of blood, and there was also a hint of blood red. He could tell at a glance that it was a blood evil spirit born from refining the blood essence of living beings. And this blood evil spirit could rush out from the ground and reach the sky above the ground. This blood evil spirit was so strong that it could not be produced without 100 billion living beings. Curious, Luo Fan pressed his body down, turned into a rainbow, and landed where the blood evil spirit rushed out. Arriving here, the strength of the blood evil spirit had reached an unimaginable level, materializing into a strong blood-red light. The smell of blood penetrated his body. Luo Fan stood quietly at the mouth of the volcano, looked down, and found that the mouth of the mountain was hundreds of miles in diameter, and was directly covered by a thick blood-red fog. It was difficult to see what was hidden under the thick blood-red fog. Just what is it that can actually produce such a powerful blood fiend? Luo Fan was curious. Golden and silver light flashed in his eyes, and he constantly peeled off the thick blood-red fog, revealing the truth hidden within. As he went deeper, the shock in his heart grew stronger. He looked straight down, illuminating more than 10,000 miles, but he could not see the end. He could not see the bottom of the mountain at all, and the blood evil spirit contained in the mouth of the mountain became stronger as he went deeper. It was obvious that the deeper he went, the closer he was to the source of the blood evil spirit. Is there another world hidden below? If not, how can there be so many living beings for people to refine? Luo Fan became more curious, and his desire to explore became stronger. After going more than 30,000 miles underground, Luo Fan's eyes finally saw the end of the mountain pass, and the bottom of the mountain pass.